Chapter 2099. Wei Wei Bai bent down and gently stroked his hair. She did not say anything. She maintained this position as if to comfort him, but she knew that he would not feel anything. She suddenly asked the system softly, "Every time I leave, are all the men like this?" Jiang Joshi could be considered one of the few with an especially strong temperament among so many planes. He was in such a terrible state. What about the others? The system was untying the red string. When it heard the question, it looked up. It saw Jiang Joshi curled up into a ball and sitting on the ground awkwardly. He buried his head in his palms and cried hoarsely. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless, but when she bent down and reached out to touch him, there was undeniable sadness in her eyes. After the strategy was successful, the soul left the body. The shield's effect began to weaken. She could feel emotions. The system suppressed the uneasiness in its heart. He can't take it in the beginning. It's always a little too intense. He'll be fine after a few days. Wei Wei Bai did not say anything. She only gently stroked Jiang Joshi's head. He was like a child, hurt to the point that he could not face the tragic reality of this world. Wei Wei Bai was speechless for a moment. For the first time, there was confusion in her eyes. Was it that painful? There was a faint but undeniable fluctuation of emotions in her heart. Was it pity, or sadness? The day the funeral parlor took care of the body and was about to send it for cremation, Jiang Joshi invited many people. There were colleagues and friends that Wei Wei Bai knew. There were also business partners, businessmen, and colleagues that he knew. This was a special cremation ceremony. When everyone came, their faces were blank and shocked. At the cremation site, Wei Wei Bai's body lay pale. She was wearing a beautiful and gorgeous wedding dress, with a large bow at the back of her waist. Her hands were crossed on her stomach, holding a small flower ball of lily. She was beautiful as a little angel. Even if she was still cute, so pure that it was surprising. Jiang Joshi was dressed in a black suit with a bouquet on his chest. He had gray hair and faint wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. His handsome face was as pale as Wei Wei Bai's. It was so much so that it was visible to the naked eye. Even the flesh on his face was gone. It made him seem even colder, especially desperate and fierce. Jiang Joshi reached out and slowly touched her fingers. Her fingers were already stiff. "I've invited everyone here today to give us your blessings. We're getting married today." All the guests who came to attend the cremation and funeral were dumbfounded. But at the same time, they admired Jiang Joshi's feelings. Everyone reacted quickly and applauded. It didn't matter if he was sincere or not. The scene was still very lively. Jiang Joshi forced a smile and pretended to be happy. But there was a hint of sadness in his smile. He lowered his head and whispered in Wei Wei Bai's ear, "Wei Wei, you're going to marry me today. Are you happy?" Wei Wei Bai crossed her arms and stood beside her corpse with a speechless expression. This wedding was really unique and full of creativity. Jiang Joshi's gentleness was considered gentle and warm in other situations. But in this context, it was very scary. Jiang Joshi knew that she couldn't hear him. He could barely maintain the smile on his face. Then, he used some effort to straighten her finger and put the ring on her finger. The beautiful diamond ring shone brightly on her gloved finger. It was like how she looked on stage. It was so stunning that people couldn't take their eyes off her. /to-txt. Download Transmigration System, Adonis, come here and read this on your phone, https://sashu.com// for the convenience of your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 2100. He didn't expect that he would fall in love at first sight. For her, it was the beginning of a broken life. The wedding was very simple. After exchanging rings, he gently kissed her forehead. Tears still fell on her lips. Wei Wei Bai had been squatting beside her corpse. The system was still repairing the machine. The system was also pitiful. It couldn't bear to buy the old machine, but it was really reluctant to spend millions of life points to repair it. After the corpse was successfully cremated. After Jiang Joshi returned, he locked himself in his room. He seemed to have suddenly lost his purpose in life. He didn't know what to do. He forced himself to handle Wei Wei Bai's funeral. Give her a warm wedding and let her leave in peace. This was the only goal in his mind during this period of time. Luan Shan and a few high-level groups had obtained his authorization during this period of time. The entire company was managed by them. If Luan Shan was ruthless enough, during this period of time, he could have relied on his authorization. He could have gotten the entire company under his name. After all, he was the one who promoted him. His ability was outstanding. After about 2 weeks of locking himself in, Luan Shan finally led people to pry open the door. Although Jiang Joshi didn't seek his own death. But it wasn't far off. He vomited whatever he ate. His body was so thin that it was below the health value. He didn't go out, nor did he go through rehabilitation. He lived in a complete daze. When Luan Shan carried him to the hospital, both his physical and mental health were on the verge of collapse. Depression. This thing was actually caused by Jiang Joshi. Although Luan Shan knew that anyone could suffer from this illness. But what kind of person was Jiang Joshi? He could crawl out of the mud pit even when he was disabled and created the company with the highest profits in recent years. And as long as this company didn't seek death, it could continue to be prosperous. This kind of person, what could defeat him? Luan Shan worshipped Jiang Joshi. He worshipped Jiang Joshi to the point of being a teacher and a father. Opening the door of the ward, Luan Shan saw Jiang Joshi vomiting what he ate. This was anorexia. Severe food rejection caused by depression. It should be said that his body seemed to want to die. However, even though he was so thin that he didn't look human anymore, Jiang Joshi's back was still straight, but his eyes were covered with a layer of death aura. Luan Shan really didn't know how to comfort him or how to open his mouth to cheer him up. He had no choice but to take out his laptop and a pile of documents. Director Jiang, we don't dare to make decisions on some big projects recently. We need your signature. Jiang Joshi lazily lifted his eyelids. There was no expression on his face. He seemed to have lost his soul and did not react to anything. Luan Shan refused to give up. Recently, there are still a few companies eyeing us covetously. We can't handle them. If we don't take action now, we might be acquired. He had built the company single-handedly. If the company was bought over, Jiang Joshi would at least have some reaction. However, to Luan Shan's disappointment, Jiang Joshi only glanced at him and then took the document. He didn't even look at them before he signed all of them. If someone in the company wants it, just give it to them. After Jiang Joshi said this, he closed his eyes. His face was ashen. He was like a corpse without any signs of life. Luan Shan could see clearly that he was planning to exhaust himself to death. He had no choice but to mention the Qin family. Jiang Joshi finally looked up with interest. He had finally turned on his phone, and it had taken him 3 hours to do so. Let everyone in the Qin family get the retribution they deserved. Including Qin Wanqi. Chapter 2101. After everything was done, Jiang Joshi lay back down. He was too tired. Luan Shan wanted to say something, but he heard Jiang Joshi talking to himself. Tell me, is this karma? Luan Shan was stunned. Then, he heard his next sentence. I'm too bad, so the person I love the most was taken away. This is my karma. For a moment, this sentence was unbearable. While Wan Shan was circling Jiang Joshi, Wei Wei Bai sat in the dark with a confused expression. When would the machine be fixed? The system said, give me 3 more days. 3 lines were solved, only 2 were left. 1 more big knot and it would succeed. Wei Wei Bai nodded, then asked the system in the dark. How is Jiang Joshi? Has he recovered? After her body was cremated, the system pulled her into this dark world. She did not need to eat, and there were all kinds of novels and movies to watch. But she did not know why she kept thinking about Jiang Joshi. She was worried that he would suddenly go crazy and commit suicide. Without the blocker, she was still very kind. Please don't commit suicide, otherwise it would be too awkward when they meet. The system glanced at Jiang Joshi. The boss was tortured until he did not look human, and was being treated for depression. His underlings surrounded him, following him around. To cheer up the boss, the Qin family was pulled up and whipped again. All of them were sent to prison to receive education. But the boss's depression was still serious. Anyway, it was fine as long as Wei Wei Bai did not see this. The blocker was not useful for souls that had successfully left the body. If she saw too much, what if she suddenly felt moved? What if she felt pity? Fuck, would there still be a strategy in the future? Men were all pig trotters. Yi Yuxuan's fragments were even worse. This was so depressed, but there were many more. Pity my ass. So the system did not feel pity at all. So the system was calm. There's a new love by his side, a healing little white lotus, Wan Shan. She's around him every day. He's living happily now. Wei Wei Bai heard and nodded silently. Only after recovering would it be fine. Feelings, as expected, did not last long. However, this change of heart was a little too fast. As expected of a man, hee. After being locked in the dark room for a few weeks, the system cheered. It must have warned Yi Yuxuan that Red would kill Wei Wei Bai. It told him to be careful and not to endanger Wei Wei Bai. That was why the red line wasn't so tightly wound this time. The system, let's go. Bai Wei Wei nodded, then quietly closed her eyes and soon fell into a deep sleep. The system hurriedly carried her back to the reality tunnel. This time, the spatial storms in the passageway had stopped. It was especially quiet along the way. The quiet system was a little scared. But when he saw the door to reality in front of him, he paid special attention to his surroundings. He was overjoyed. Yi Yuxuan really didn't stay here. That was great. Scolding him was useful. The system hurriedly stepped over. Just as it was about to rush into the door, its arms were empty, it paused. The soul in its arms was gone. The system looked up in shock. It saw a hidden golden light appear in the darkness. Wei Wei Bai's soul was pulled away by the red line. The process was too fast. It was so fast that it did not have time to react. The system looked at the golden light in the darkness and was completely enraged. It did not hesitate to reach out and cut its forehead. Beads of blood appeared on its forehead. The blood turned into a ferocious and arrogant pattern. In the darkness, the system's small body grew bigger and bigger. Finally, it turned into its peak form. It rushed into the golden light recklessly. Fuck you, Yi Yuxuan. Give me back my host's soul. Damn it, I promised not to hurt Wei Wei Bai in the soul channel. It had actually gotten worse. The system finally went crazy with anger. If something happened to Wei Wei Bai's soul, it would die together with Yi Yuxuan. Download the https://www.sashu com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://sashu.com// comma. Chapter 2102. The golden land in the darkness was decadent, desolate, trembling, and cold. It was crazy. After the system rushed into this place, every step was difficult. The bones on the ground were Yi Yuxuan's spoils of war. This man's starting place, the source of his soul, was a paradise full of absurdity and evil. The system was terrified of Yi Yuxuan's raw power. But no matter how terrified it was, could it give Wei Wei Bai's soul to Yi Yuxuan? Her soul was weaker than a normal person's. The wear and tear from multiple transmigrations, if it were not for Yi Yuxuan's blessing and his life points. Her soul would have long been worn out. When the system first had the idea of leeching off Yi Yuxuan's life points, it was also taking a huge risk. Wei Wei Bai's soul, in the hands of the unconscious Yi Yuxuan, was just a small toy. If that big boss accidentally used a little strength, her soul would be crushed into pieces. The system saw the tall skeleton mountain. It was frighteningly tall. It threw out a bright red flame, melting a path up the mountain. Then it rushed up. It was already prepared for battle. It had been suppressing its power, not daring to use too much. It was all to conserve energy. There were still many things to do in the future. It had used up all its stored power in one go. What about the future? The system was like an old mother, fussing over the power in its hands. But when it reached the peak, it saw the familiar figure that made people want to turn and run. It still rushed over without hesitation. Only you know how to sneak attack. I know how to too. In the end, before he could even throw out a fireball, the golden radiance suddenly appeared and surrounded him like a blow from the dimension reduction strike. The system was suddenly covered in a large net. The man sitting on the throne, half closed his eyes, golden light flowing in his eyes. His indifferent eyes showed a trace of confusion. He gradually woke up, but saw a familiar body, curled up in his arms. It was like the position in the mother's womb. Her soul was a weak white, and her face was almost transparent. Her black hair fell on his legs, and the ends of her hair even fell to his calves. There was a sharp pain in Yi Yuxuan's brain that disturbed him. He didn't care. Instead, his flawless fingertips slowly landed on her tender and weak cheeks. The temperature of his soul was not warm. It wasn't cold at all. It was a very strange and very gentle temperature. So this was her soul. One of Yi Yuxuan's eyes was as indifferent as the barren land of the dead, but the other flashed with the warm light of a human. Many things were hazy, and his mind couldn't even squeeze in more memories. Only her face seemed to be engraved in his genes, to guide his path. The system was curled up in the net of light, the red light in its hand faintly visible. However, he didn't use his ultimate move. Instead, he looked at Yi Yuxuan with a strange and cautious expression. Yi Yuxuan had awakened. No, it was more like a returning soul fragment that had entered the soul of the primordial land. In fact, it even overpowered the dormant soul force and woke up. This was Yi Yuxuan in reality. Although he seemed to be missing something, it was already incredible to be able to do this. Yi Yuxuan's comprehension was too strong. Last time, he told him to try his best to remember the world in his dreams, and to remember to take all his power with him on the way back. He really did awaken a part of his consciousness in the primordial land. Even if this part of his consciousness couldn't last long, it was still very powerful. Chapter 2103. He had not received any real training, and there was no opportunity for him to awaken. In fact, he had always been suppressed. He could actually explore to this extent by himself. What kind of monster was this? Yi Yuxuan's half-closed eyes slowly raised. He looked at the system. In the darkness, his voice was faint and distant. So you brought her to steal my life force? Her body was filled with his life force. The corners of the system's mouth twitched. That was too polite. It was basically stealing. Transmigrating to the plane and rubbing Yi Yuxuan's aura. Then in reality, it made Yi Yuxuan's emotions fluctuate and took his life force. The life force recognized aura. And Wei Wei Bai obtained Yi Yuxuan's aura through the plane strategy. It would make the life force recognize Wei Wei Bai, and then let Wei Wei Bai obtain Yi Yuxuan's life force. The host was not clear about this process. He was the only one who was worried. Yi Yuxuan could not remember anything. His mind was still muddled. His warm eyes began to be eroded by coldness bit by bit. There was not much time left. He seemed to sigh. His expressionless face approached her soul. A few wisps of golden light gently fell into her body. Then, like falling petals, they dissipated. These wisps of golden light made the illusory color of Wei Wei Bai's soul feel more substantial. The system held the attack in its hand, and it was very difficult to endure. It was very afraid that Yi Yuxuan would suddenly not be able to hold on, lose control of his power, and kill Wei Wei Bai. It was also afraid that Wei Wei Bai would not be able to handle these wisps of power. However, the nourishing power that condensed the soul was the life force that was forcibly extracted from Yi Yuxuan's land of origin. Although it could not increase Wei Wei Bai's lifespan, it could strengthen her soul and withstand the wear and tear of transmigration. It was protecting her, and there was a way to avoid the damage caused to her through the crack. Yi Yuxuan could actually give her more, and he could even give her enough lifespan. But the prerequisite was that he had awakened. The current Yi Yuxuan was in a state of chaos. It was already a miracle that he could awaken so much. Yi Yuxuan gave what he thought was good to Wei Wei Bai's soul. His mind was getting heavier and heavier, as if he knew that he could not do more. So his finger, as if it passed through the darkness, he did not touch her at all. He was afraid that the power on his fingertips. Even if he knew that there was something better, he could not touch her. These were all instinctive actions. In fact, his mind was crazy and irritable. Wanted, devour her everything. It was especially Lu. The emotion in Yi Yuxuan's eyes slowly disappeared. He suddenly raised his wrist and gently drew a line in the air with his finger, as if he was a god descending to earth. Boundless corpses and bones were overturned, forming a terrifying sea of mountains. It was his irritable power that was out of control. But not a trace of damage fell on the surroundings. There was not even a sound of alarm. Wei Wei Bai's soul was curled up like a baby, still sleeping quietly in his strong embrace. Yi Yuxuan tilted his head before the last trace of emotion disappeared. He suddenly asked, "What can I do to give her more?" It was the first time he saw her soul. Compared to him, it was too fragile. Fragile like a dandelion in the breeze. It also looked like a broken butterfly wing. Like it would die at any time. Yi Yuxuan's voice was unusually cold and calm because of the loss of emotion. /phone. Chapter 2104. But the strong protectiveness in his words was unquestionable. The system had already corroded the golden net of power, but he was still waiting for a sneak attack, so he did not move. Hearing Yi Yuxuan's words, the system was calm and said casually, "Wait for you to awaken. Once you awaken, you can control your power." Yi Yuxuan, who controlled power, would definitely be able to give his power to Wei Wei Bai. The prerequisite was, if the awakened Yi Yuxuan still had his memories as a human. The system looked at Yi Yuxuan coldly. That was why he did not want Wei Wei Bai to have feelings for Yi Yuxuan. In the future, Yi Yuxuan would really have a chance to awaken. So many feelings: love, cherish, and protect. And the despair of losing her might disappear. Yi Yuxuan's love, TSK. It was still a question whether there were any emotions in his origin. All the emotional fragments were emotions forced out by Wei Wei Bai. In reality, as a human, Yi Yuxuan loved Wei Wei Bai. What was the use? In essence, Yi Yuxuan was an old monster without joy, sorrow, heartlessness, and love. That was why his host also had to face Yi Yuxuan. Without joy, sorrow, heartlessness, and love was fair. Yi Yuxuan said lightly, "Awaken." It seemed like doubt, but it did not. The golden light in his eyes also calmed down. In the end, it was like a cold, mechanical gem, with a beautiful luster, but without any feelings of life. The system suddenly rushed out of the golden net of power, its flamboyant red hair emitting a dazzling red halo in the darkness. This action was light and fast. It was like the best thief in this world. The system gently hugged Wei Wei Bai's soul into its arms, but its body was tense like an attacking sword. Yi Yuxuan did not chase after it. He didn't stop the system from doing what it did either. He sat quietly on the lonely throne with a rusty sword beside him. Boundless white bones were churning. In this land, only he was still sitting. It was unknown how many years he had been sitting there. The system passed through the rolling bones, broke out of the golden earth, and tore open the border of darkness. He finally saw the door to reality. When he finally broke through the door, he immediately put Wei Wei Bai's soul back into his body. Then, he hugged his head and screamed, "I'm going to shrink into a little bean again. It wasn't easy for me to grow to 1.6 meters. It wasn't easy for him to reach 1.6 meters in the last plane. Now, he was 1.3 meters tall. He had forcefully returned to his peak state. Although he hadn't been able to fight Yi Yuxuan head-on, he had still used up a lot of energy. The system's body shrunk rapidly. In the end, his clothes were too big, and his sleeves and trousers were too long. He looked like a primary school student who had stolen junior high school clothes. No, it would be an exaggeration to say that he was in kindergarten. Not 1.3 meters. 1 meters. The system cried as it went back to the supermarket to look for clothes in the kindergarten section. What would it do if it shrunk into a baby and couldn't carry Wei Wei Bai's soul? She seemed to hear the system crying. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Head. Damn, it felt like dozens of drills were desperately drilling into her skull. Her ears were buzzing. Her body was heavy as if 100 ghosts were pressing down on her bed. Why did it feel like she was going to die this time? Her body should be better every time she woke up. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes and shouted, "See Bao, who bullied you?" The system cried, which was rare. She had to make a comforting gesture. Look, she even changed the way she addressed it. The system looked at its own 1-meter body and gritted its teeth. Who's a Bao? You're a Bao. I'm a valiant, masculine, and strong male system. Don't call me Bao. Chapter 2105. What was missing? What was taboo? He was almost becoming a baby now. What a tough life. Wei Wei Bai calmly changed her name. Oh, for sons, what's wrong? Could it be that something big has happened and your host wants to hang up? She could not be blamed for thinking this way because her body felt like it was about to crack. Why were her bones so sore? This pain was making her want to explode. The system was changing into its children's clothing. It said coldly, "You won't die. It's just that you were in the space-time storm and stayed for a while. That's why it put a burden on your body. You'll be fine later. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows and finally realized that something was wrong. Your voice is a little childish. Are you acting cute to me? Although his voice was sometimes weird in the past, it was not as obvious as this time. The system grabbed its neck and wanted to slap itself. When it became small, it still remembered to maintain the stability of its voice. But when it came back, it almost escaped death. It actually forgot its voice for a while. His voice now was soft and tender. How could a male system be so girly? Wei Wei Bai added, it's quite nice. So you have the ability to change your voice. Come, let me hear you call me mother. System, Wei Wei Bai, I suddenly want to hear a cute and sweet little girl's voice. Call me mother. System, did the host want it to kill its master? Then the system laughed coldly, infertility. Wei Wei Bai retorted leisurely, I'm back in reality. I can conceive now. System, it forgot about this. In reality, Wei Wei Bai did not have any problem with infertility. Wei Wei Bai lay down for a while before she forced herself to get up. She looked and realized that it was Yi Yuxuan's apartment again. Yi Yuxuan was discharged from the hospital in just 3 days. She did not know how his body was doing. The room was still decorated in a feminine way, but it was not overly sweet. It was the kind of fresh color that adults liked. It was obvious that the designer had spent a lot of money on it. Wei Wei Bai went out of the room and saw Qin Qiu telling the nanny something. When he got closer, he realized that they were talking about dinner. Qin Qiu heard the sound of footsteps, looked back, and immediately smiled. Wei Wei, you're awake. I'll give you a routine examination later to determine the degree of improvement of your heart. Every time Wei Wei Bai woke up, her heart would feel better. They kept such a miracle a secret. After all, this kind of miraculous recovery was very abnormal. Under Yi Yuxuan's instructions, she had bribed everyone from top to bottom. The information was not allowed to go through the official channels and was kept in private. He did not want Wei Wei Bai to receive any attention. Wei Wei Bai nodded and looked left and right to make sure that she didn't see the person she was looking for. Where's Yi Yuxuan? Qin Qiu pointed to a room on the left side of the corridor. Resting in the guest room. Wei Wei Bai frowned. What's wrong? Yi Yuxuan wanted to stay by her side even when he was sleeping. This kind of situation was rare now. Qin Qiu touched his chin. After waking up yesterday, he moved to the guest room. I guess he couldn't stand it and wanted to do something to you, but he felt sorry for his conscience, so he quickly left so as not to do something irreversible. Wei Wei Bai was thick-skinned and had no expression at all. I don't mind if he does something to me. Qin Qiu, Wei Wei Bai stopped teasing him. Where's my father? /T. Chapter 2106. Qin Qiu, because Xian Xian is on holiday these days, your father is going to work in your company. Without Yi Yuxuan's hosting, Bai Changyan has to work hard again. After all, it's not easy to find a son-in-law who has more money than the Bai family and who doesn't always stick to the Bai family. Wei Wei Bai smiled, it's time to go to work. You're still young, and you're already thinking about retirement. How can there be such a good thing? Bai Changyan is in his 40s, and he takes good care of himself. He doesn't look like a retired old man at all. It was only because he relied on Yi Yuxuan to help him that he was able to relax. Wei Wei Bai strolled to the door of the guest room, reached out and politely knocked on the door. She didn't hear a response. Wei Wei Bai's heart sank. Yi Yuxuan is such a vigilant person, even if he is sleeping, he should hear it. Wei Wei Bai immediately tried to turn the doorknob and opened it. She looked over. The decoration of the guest room was still cold and simple, brown wood, and white soft bed. Yi Yuxuan was lying on the bed with a pale face. Wei Bai's face changed slightly. She immediately rushed in and pressed his wrist. The temperature was terrifyingly cold. Yi Yuxuan. Wei Bai couldn't help but sound anxious. On his handsome face, the cold gray aura of death was exceptionally obvious. Wei Bai immediately got up, turned around and shouted, "Qin Qiu." She was just about to run out when a huge force suddenly hugged her. Wei Bai was thrown on the bed by the man behind her. Yi Yuxuan still had his eyes closed. Almost by instinct, he hugged Wei Bai into his arms. This was an unusually confining posture. Wei Bai felt like she hit an ice wall. His body temperature was so low that Wei Bai was a little scared. Wei Bai was about to struggle, but Yi Yuxuan's voice suddenly sounded in her hair. "Don't move, I'll just hug you." He did not open his eyes. Instead, he seemed to be suppressing something. His muscles were obviously tense, but his voice was still calm and gentle. As he spoke, his body temperature returned to normal. It was as if the temperature just now was just her imagination. Wei Bai immediately stopped moving and let Yi Yuxuan hug her. Sick men are so fragile. Qin Qiu heard the sound and was already at the door. How? He saw that the shameless man and woman had already rolled together, and the quilt was pushed under the bed by their intense movements. Qin Qiu immediately covered his eyes and retreated. "You guys are busy, I'll go see if dinner is ready." With that, he closed the door behind him. This progress was truly amazing. As expected, Yi Yuxuan had moved to the guest room because she couldn't take it anymore. The moment Wei Bai appeared, he couldn't hold it in any longer. "Qin Qiu," called by Chang Yan with a smile on his face. "In-law, our Wei and Xian are very close." Yi Yuxuan heard the sound of the door closing, and his eyelashes finally trembled slightly. A touch of gold appeared in the dark depths of his eyes. The gold seemed to surge and disappear, and his eyes became abyss-like darkness again. He seemed a little confused and blinked. "What did I forget?" It was as if I saw a place full of bones after I died. And then, there was no memory. Yi Yuxuan always felt that he had forgotten something particularly important. His mind was hazy and numb, as if it was the aftermath of being hit by a hammer. He looked up and looked around. It was not a dream. It was indeed his room, but it was the guest room. He seemed to have slept in the guest room yesterday because he felt something was wrong with his body and woke up from a depressive nightmare. He remembered that strange thing last time said not to stay at the door of the dream, so as not to kill Wei. He thought for a long time and tried to fall asleep again, intending to find out what the so-called entrance to the dream was. Then he saw gold, bones, the rest had no impression. Where was Wei? Yi Yuxuan looked down and found Wei Bai's face leaning on his chest, her body curled up in his arms. She was staring at him with a pair of clear eyes. Yi Yuxuan reached out and gently pinched her face. It was soft and warm. Yes, she was back. So the so-called soul guarding the pile of bones in the dream. He didn't hurt her, right? Yi Yuxuan couldn't help but smile. If it really was his soul. Whether he forgot or not, he couldn't hurt her. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://sashu. COMT. Chapter 2107. Wei Wei Bai stared at him for a long time. She realized that Yi Yuxuan was pinching her face and looking at her with an indescribable expression. This expression could be described well. It was especially eerie and deep gentleness. She couldn't help but shrink back and wanted to get up from the bed. Yi Yuxuan let go of her cheek, and then pulled her back into his arms with a great force. Then he buried his head in her hair and whispered, "I'm tired. I'll sleep for a while." Wei Wei Bai's eyes immediately widened and she pushed him. "You sleep. I still want to get up." Yi Yuxuan's temperature returned to normal, and so did his body temperature. The low temperature just now seemed like a dream. Wei Wei Bai even touched her hand, worried that it was cold. It wasn't Yi Yuxuan's temperature that was too low. Yi Yuxuan's voice was dark and hoarse, as if he was tired from not sleeping for a long time. "Just for a while, Wei Wei." Wei Wei bit the two words on the tip of her tongue, and there was a lingering feeling. It was so numb that Wei Wei Bai's scalp was about to explode. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment. "Just for a while." Yi Yuxuan nodded. "Just for a while." She didn't continue to reject him, but her body softened. Yi Yuxuan narrowed his eyes in satisfaction, then closed his eyes and continued to sleep. He was indeed very tired. It seemed like he had walked a very long road. But he forgot what he saw on the road. He just remembered not to hurt her. Yi Yuxuan vaguely thought of the man in his dream. After his depression was better, he went to work, ate, and worked as usual. He put her photo on the bedside table and maintained the way she was in the room. His rationality clearly realized that he was reminiscing about a lost lover. Even if everything was still there, she was no longer there. In the beginning, he had pulled himself together and thought that even if she died, she didn't want him to be so dispirited. That was why he was active in rehabilitation. When his legs were in good condition, he didn't even need to rely on crutches. Other than walking with a slight limp, everything was normal. In his dream, he had experienced many things and suffered many hardships. He crawled up again and again. He thought that he would be able to get up this time. He carried on living with the dead in his heart. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years passed. Even the people around him thought that he was back to normal. He didn't show any signs of depression. In fact, they were even more proactive and enterprising. The company was also thriving. He had even started doing charity work, and it was doing quite well. He even won the award of the most outstanding corporate leader. Life was really peaceful. Once, I went to look at a construction project. A glass walkway was being built on the top floor of the building. Below them was a skyscraper, and it was very exciting to step on it. This was also a selling point. After all, who knew how hard the glass was? It was not something that could be broken by human feet. The glass walkway was not completed yet. When he walked up, there was no guardrail at the end of the walkway. Almost no one stopped him. He acted too normal. Just like usual, he walked up step by step. Then, without any warning, there was even a cold and elegant smile at the corner of his mouth. He jumped down just like that. He had never recovered from his depression. He even had hallucinations. When he saw her, he reached out to hug her, so he walked over. Before he died, he vaguely felt that something had been missing for the past 5 years. It turned out that he lacked feelings. He didn't have any feelings, and he didn't know how to live happily. He was just moving forward based on his biological instincts. All work was just work. Chapter 2108. Anyway, if he didn't do it, he wouldn't know what to do. All kinds of entertainment didn't need to exist for him because he didn't feel anything. Sometimes, when he had nothing to do, he would just sit there and not know what to do. A life without feelings was worthless. And his feelings were all on Wei Wei. Yi Yuxuan lowered his head, closed his eyes, and hugged her tightly. Fortunately, it was just a dream. He could still come back, and she would always be by his side. Wei Wei Bai felt that he was hugging her a little too tightly, like an octopus. Breathless. Sleepy. But seeing that he hadn't recovered from his illness, she reluctantly forgave him. This time, she was only gone for a short time. She still remembered that Yi Yuxuan was so weak because of her pudding. Wei Wei Bai definitely couldn't sleep after sleeping for 3 days. Yi Yuxuan slowly fell asleep again. Hearing his almost inaudible breathing above her head, she couldn't help but look up. She saw that the shadow under Yi Yuxuan's eyelashes was very heavy, and his beautiful jaw was a little tight even when he was sleeping. His sleeping posture was extremely alert. She couldn't help but reach out and scratch his chin. Yi Yuxuan frowned, but it seemed that he was too familiar with Wei Wei Bai's scent, and his brows relaxed slightly. Even his expression softened. How cute! Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but laugh. She pulled her hand back and didn't disturb his sleep. As she laughed, she suddenly pursed her lips. Why was she laughing so flirtatiously? Or was he a short-lived ghost? Dating was something that couldn't be done at this time. The time wasn't right, and the timing wasn't right. Wei Wei Bai didn't want to start at the wrong time and lead to a tragedy later on. So she suppressed the throbbing in her heart and sighed to herself. She still had to conquer him quickly. Her life was her capital to squander. Wei Wei Bai thought that Yi Yuxuan would sleep until tomorrow. She clutched her stomach and felt a little hungry. As a result, when it was time for dinner, Yi Yuxuan immediately opened his eyes. If she wasn't in his arms, she was sure that he was asleep. He woke up so quickly that she thought he was pretending to be asleep. Yi Yuxuan blinked, and the drowsiness in her eyes was replaced by sobriety. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It's time to eat. After he finished speaking, he got up. His arm was resting on Wei Wei Bai's neck. When he got up, the force happened to pull her up as well. Wei Wei Bai had been lying on the bed for a long time. She was slow to respond. Yi Yuxuan reached out and touched her stomach as casually and naturally as if he was touching a toy. There's not much meat in his stomach, he muttered softly. Wei Wei Bai was such a thick-skinned person, but she was actually careless and flirted with by him. Her heart beat a few beats faster. And Yi Yuxuan was so familiar with this technique. What did he do to her when she was asleep? He probably did everything. So Wei Wei Bai also reached out and pressed his stomach expressionlessly. Hey, you don't have, some had muscles. This difference, forget it, let's not compare. So Bai Wei Wei very calmly retracted her hand, then jumped up and jumped off the bed. I'm starving. Let's go eat. Yi Yuxuan sat on the bed and watched Wei Wei Bai run away quickly as if she was being chased by a thief. He reached out and touched his stomach. It didn't feel as good as Wei Wei Bai's. She was soft. Yi Yuxuan's silly look only lasted for a moment before he returned to normal. He got off the bed and changed his clothes. When he was buttoning his shirt, his expression and actions were surprisingly similar to the man in her dream. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://sashu.com/. Chapter 2109. Yi Yuxuan paused, his eyes cold. This cold look was very similar. Yi Yuxuan thought for a moment, then suddenly said softly, "If you don't have a reason to stop me, after dinner, I will tell Wei Wei that I am the man in her dreams." Every one of them. He had always been curious why he could not tell Wei Wei. He was telling the men in her dreams. He had tried a few times before, using dreams as an excuse to tell Wei Wei by what happened in her dreams. But she looked like she had never heard of it, looking at him blankly. At first, he did not know much, and thought that she had forgotten. But later, he slowly figured it out. He had a rough idea of what she was doing with that thing. She was trying to survive. Every time she woke up, her heart would feel better, and her dying body would miraculously become full of vitality. This was not a coincidence, it was the same once, twice, and 3 times. There was no such continuous coincidence. And she remembered what happened in her dreams. So he could not tell her, it could only be that thing that was stopping him. Yi Yuxuan had just finished buttoning his shirt, his face cold and noble, and was about to walk out. The system suddenly said, "Don't tell her." Yi Yuxuan stopped in his tracks, his face did not show any surprise. The system said coldly, "Don't hurt her." Yi Yuxuan looked up coldly, and saw a golden light spot in the air. The system that became Little Rice Ball, he was unusually small and cute, like a child of a few years old. This size. Yi Yuxuan looked comfortable, because he could not do anything to Wei Wei Bai. Even holding hands made them look like mother and son. A dangerous light appeared in Yi Yuxuan's eyes, his expressionless face had a hint of viciousness. "Will I hurt her?" The system said, "That's not what I mean. Every time I bring her to the place where your soul fragments are, you don't have any memory of it. If you tell her that it was all you, then her feelings for you will only deepen." Yi Yuxuan, deeper feelings. He almost held these words in his mouth as he softly said them in an unusually dangerous tone. The system said, "Don't even think about making her love you even more. Do you remember that time when you came back from a dream and were in so much pain?" Yi Yuxuan thought about it calmly. Every time he woke up, the most painful was when he was in the hospital with Wei Wei. It was as if his emotions had suddenly exploded. His bones and flesh were in unbearable pain. It was as if a bomb had exploded in his chest. Even when he was so patient, he was almost unable to bear the torment of that pain. After all, there was a limit to what his body could withstand, even if his consciousness was strong enough to surpass his physical body. Once the body was on the verge of collapse, even the consciousness could not be saved. The system replied, "It's the power of the dream realm that's weakened. Your feelings in the dream realm are stacked, and when the feelings from so many dreams explode, even you can't handle it. That time was very dangerous." "Yi Yuxuan, you're saying that she'll be in such pain too?" The system said, "When I'm in the dream realm, I always isolate her feelings. If I don't isolate them, she'll be in so much pain when you don't have your memories and keep hurting her." Yi Yuxuan was slightly stunned. His eyebrows slightly furrowed. This was a reason. Indeed, in the dream realm, he had a terrible personality and kept hurting her. He could not imagine how much pain she would have to go through to win him over if she had the same deep feelings for him. The system said, "I've saved up the isolated feelings, but the jar that stores feelings has a capacity. If Wei Wei's feelings suddenly explode, the jar won't be able to handle it and she'll die. The transmigration system, my Adonis, come here, / the transmigration system, my Adonis, come here, / transmigration system, my Adonis, come here. The transmigration system, my Adonis, come here. The transmigration system, my Adonis, come here." Chapter 21:10. Yi Yuxuan did not speak. His face was pale. The silence made him seem unusually lonely, but also cold and strong. The system said, I'm dealing with her feelings. As long as she doesn't like you that much, I'll try my best to get rid of those feelings. In the future, even if something happens to the container, she could bear that kind of pain. Yi Yuxuan did not speak, as if he was thinking about something. The system said, I can't isolate or get rid of real feelings. That's why her good impression of you in the real world is real. When Yi Yuxuan heard this answer, he finally raised his eyes. There was a hint of gentleness in his eyes. You've convinced me. I'll allow you to deal with her feelings in the dream. Indeed, the him in the dream was not worthy of her feelings. The dark jealousy in Yi Yuxuan's heart disappeared. Because Wei Wei Bai only had feelings for him in the real world. And her life was the most important thing. Yi Yuxuan asked the system about his plan. The system did not lie to him and told him the unimportant things. Yi Yuxuan had basically figured out what the system was doing. Her life came from him, not his dream. But every time he transmigrated, he could only accept his life by getting his breath. It was a triangular cycle. Yi Yuxuan asked softly, how long does she have to live now? The system was silent for a while, then answered, 7,500 days. In the previous world, it was 6,500 days. But this time, in less than a few hours, Yi Yuxuan gave another 1,000 life points to Wei Wei Bai. It was really a life points printing machine. Yi Yuxuan reached out and hooked a few buttons on his collar, loosening his collar. To prevent himself from being affected by the previous dream, he wore the same style of clothes. In the past, he revealed a lot of flaws, so he was worried that his personality would be similar to the one in the dream. She would start to suspect. He changed into a coat that the man in his previous dream would not wear. The color was even a little pink. Then, he rolled up his sleeves and said expressionlessly, that's too little. Continue. If he told her the truth, it would endanger her life. He could keep this secret until the end of time. The system held its breath until it saw that Yi Yuxuan had left. Only then did it lie down. It was really difficult to deal with. Now, Yi Yuxuan had practically taken out his underwear. What should he do in the future? He must not let Yi Yuxuan find out that he was going to break them up in the future. Otherwise, it would be strange if Yi Yuxuan didn't destroy him. The system silently prayed. Evil main system God, please bless and protect your Tongzi, so that my host can successfully fulfill her wish. After Yi Yuxuan walked out, she saw Wei Wei Bai picking up her chopsticks. She looked happy and said to Qin Qiu next to her, is my dad back? Qin Qiu just took off his apron, put it aside and said, he made a call. He's on the way. He'll be back in 5 minutes. Wei Wei Bai immediately turned to the kitchen and shouted, Auntie, leave more sweet and sour ribs for my dad. The nanny responded. Wei Wei Bai turned back and waited for the dishes to be served. Yi Yuxuan stood in the corner, watching her happily count the dishes and then say something to Qin Qiu. It was a warm and beautiful scene. Even Yi Yuxuan, who was so jealous, had a very gentle look on her face for a while. That thing that wasn't human might be right. Feelings must be isolated. Otherwise, wouldn't she also have to suffer the pain he suffered in the dream? Yi Yuxuan whispered to herself, as long as it's real. As long as it was real, her feelings for him were real. Even if that feeling was not so deep. It was not so soul-stirring. But at least she was happy. Yi Yuxuan stepped over and saw Wei Wei Bai looking up at him. For a moment, there was a flash of surprise in her eyes. Of course, it was gone soon. This was a woman's most primitive appreciation for a man. He caught it. Yi Yuxuan did not say anything, just faintly evoked a smile. After walking over, he reached out and touched her head. You've worked hard, Wei Wei. Eat more. She had been constantly shuttling, constantly getting closer to him. You've worked hard. Comma. Chapter 21:11. Wei Wei Bai was stunned by Yi Yuxuan's touch. Yi Yuxuan did not say anything, but quietly sat down and looked at her with soft eyes. The robot suddenly had feelings. Those eyes were deep and affectionate. If anyone learned a bit of his eyes, it was estimated that they could get a few awards. Wei Wei Bai trembled and immediately did not dare to look at him. In reality, she had to take it easy. Her heart could not cross the line too much. If a man like Yi Yuxuan seriously wanted to flirt with her, she could not stand it. Wei Wei Bai silently looked at the chopsticks and did not look at him. Yi Yuxuan saw that she was holding the chopsticks and did not serve the rice. He calmly got up, took her bowl, and served her rice. Wei Wei Bai saw the good family man Yi Yuxuan, with a mature and calm face, holding a spoon and serving her rice. This was simply, although it was not in line with Yi Yuxuan's cold character. But Wei Wei Bai, who could eat rice, said that Yi Yuxuan looked very good and handsome. He put the bowl in front of Wei Wei Bai. Qin Qiu had already taken the opportunity and immediately handed over his bowl. Xian, I want one too. The sound of the door opening and closing also came. Bai Changyan casually hung his briefcase and coat on the hanger at the door. What do you want? After that, Bai Changyan saw Yi Yuxuan holding a spoon. His son-in-law was really virtuous. He even knew how to serve rice. Bai Changyan's face was gratified and immediately ran over. Little Xian, give me a bowl of rice too. So many people crowded in at once. Yi Yuxuan calmly put down the spoon. It's time to get off work, let's eat. After that, he sat back gracefully. There was only a bowl of rice in front of Wei Wei Bai at the whole table. The nanny had just brought in the last dish of soup. Seeing that everyone had arrived, she immediately said, do you have enough chopsticks and bowls? Qin Qiu nodded, enough. Bai Changyan finally saw that his daughter was sitting properly. He wasn't surprised at all. He woke up once every 3 days, and every time he woke up, there were no sequelae. His heart had even gotten better. After seeing this kind of miracle for a long time, one would become calm and collected. Therefore, Bai Changyan also sat at the dining table and said with a smile, Wei Wei, Daddy has worked hard all day. Give Daddy some rice too. Wei Wei Bai didn't think too much about it. If you're hungry, eat mine first. She hadn't gotten a job yet, so her family didn't care too much about it. Therefore, she passed the bowl of rice that Yi Yuxuan had served to Bai Changyan. Bai Changyan smiled until his eyes narrowed. His daughter was still the most filial. Suddenly, he felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. Old man Bai, who had been through a lot, raised his head. Then, he saw Yi Yuxuan crossing her arms on the dining table. This was an impolite and uncouth gesture. After all, when you put your hands on the table, you took up a lot of space. And his eyes were gloomy and cold, with a murderous aura, just like the stare of death. She looked at Bai Changyan quietly. Bai Changyan hadn't picked up his chopsticks yet when Yi Yuxuan saw it and broke out in a cold sweat. Then, he silently put the bowl back in front of his daughter. Son, Daddy isn't hungry. You eat first. Pushing the food back and forth, those who didn't know would think that their family was poor. They were so poor that they couldn't afford to eat. Wei Wei Bai was going to get the empty bowl, but the rice came back. Before she could say anything, the nanny came over. She served them rice. This interruption dispelled the eerie and cold atmosphere. Wei Wei Bai had just come back and was hungry, so she didn't pay much attention to other people. Chapter 21:12. And the system didn't say anything, so Yi Yuxuan was also very normal. Everyone was here. Her life points had not been sucked away for a long time. She had been sucking Yi Yuxuan's life points. If her life points dropped, the system would definitely tell her. As a result, when she returned to reality, she treated it as a rare vacation time. Her brain stopped for most of the time, and she didn't pay attention to so many twists and turns. This also made her miss the moment when Yi Yuxuan used to look colder than death to kill by Changyan. The atmosphere of the meal was also harmonious. After all, everyone didn't have to worry about not talking when eating. Qin Qiu told Wei Wei Bai about the progress of her illness while eating. Her heart condition was very good. If she continued to sleep like this, then her heart disease would definitely be cured in a few years. After Wei Wei Bai heard this, she smiled but didn't say anything. She didn't say much. Everyone was sensible. Her situation was very abnormal. But whether it was her father or her attending physician, they were very calm. The credit for this must be Yi Yuxuan's. Wei Wei Bai looked up at Yi Yuxuan and found that he was peeling prawns. The red prawn shell faded little by little under his white fingers. He was really good looking. He could peel prawns with a sense of art. After Yi Yuxuan peeled the prawns, he calmly put them on Wei Wei Bai's small plate. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows, looked at the prawns, and then looked at him. Yi Yuxuan's expression didn't change. He took a tissue to wipe his hands, then picked up a piece of Wei Wei Bai's favorite stir-fried lotus root slices and put it on her plate. Unknowingly, the food he picked for her had piled up on a small plate. Wei Wei Bai thought about it. She was too snobbish. In the past, when he wanted to suck her life points, she used all her strength to flirt with him and be good to him. Now she found that he didn't suck her life points, but kept giving them to her. She had completely let down her guard, revealing the side of a scumbag. He had no intention of taking care of Yi Yuxuan at all. It was rare for her to make a pudding for him to eat, but she ate him to have his stomach pumped. Yi Yuxuan also felt very unlucky to have met her. Wei Wei Bai gave Yi Yuxuan a piece of meat to make it up to him, but she thought that his stomach might not have fully recovered yet. She silently stuffed the meat into her mouth, then picked up a piece of cabbage and handed it to Yi Yuxuan. She had wanted to put it on the plate. In the end, Yi Yuxuan calmly leaned over and took the food that she had put in her mouth. His thin lips were light red, and there were green and white vegetable leaves in his mouth. If someone else made such a move, it would definitely be like a sheep eating grass. Yi Yuxuan's actions could be filmed into a commercial. The image was so elegant and seductive. Wei Wei Bai's chopsticks trembled. She felt that this man was becoming more and more devilish. In the past, when he was a robot, he was so cold. She even suspected that he was not good in bed. She couldn't even imagine how he could be with a woman. She even suspected that his personality was asexual. He was completely emotionless. So no matter how shockingly handsome his appearance was, he still lacked that kind of, how should she put it? It was spiritual energy. Now, this guy seemed to have been enlightened. Every day, whether it was his gaze or his actions, the hormones he emitted could make people pregnant. Wei Wei Bai expressed that if she hadn't seen so many storms. A man like Yi Yuxuan basically only needed a flirtatious gaze. It could make her legs go weak. Wei Wei Bai's expression was tense, and she warned herself countless times. This man couldn't move now, couldn't pounce. She had her principles. Is at https://www. Sashu. Calm the. Chapter 21:13. She couldn't wear countless green hats for her savior. She calmed down and stuffed the prawn into her mouth. Then she realized that she and Yi Yuxuan were indirectly kissing through chopsticks. Well, indirect kissing was a small matter to her. So she just thought about it and didn't think much about it. She didn't see that Yi Yuxuan stared at her chopsticks for a while when she was eating. The other two old single dogs were lonely and eating with each other. In-law, eat more. You too, it must be hard for you to check Weiwei's body every day. It's not hard, ha. Every time Weiwei Bai and Yi Yuxuan sat together, the two of them were completely ignored. So Qin Qiu and Bai Changyan, this pair of poor background walls, still tried their best to support each other and not be so transparent. It was just that the food was giving off a sour smell of love. What was going on? After eating, Yi Yuxuan lifted his hand and draped a thin coat over Bai Weiwei's body. It was a little cooler at night, but it was not cold. After eating, go out for a walk. You have been lying down and need some exercise. His fingers gently rested on her shoulder. The temperature of his fingertips casually brushed her hair and helped her tidy up a strand of hair on her long hair. Weiwei Bai looked calm, although the back of her neck was numb. She didn't mind Yi Yuxuan acting on his own. After all, walking was really good for the body. Yi Yuxuan went out and looked at the sky to make sure it was sunny. He turned around and reached out to Weiwei Bai and said, "Let's go." Weiwei Bai glanced at his fingers. There were faint lines on his white palm, and the lines of his joints were very beautiful. A man's palm was delicate and flawless. No one knew how strong these hands were. Weiwei Bai was slow for a moment before she found that Yi Yuxuan didn't wait for her to reach out her hand and reached out to hold her fingers. Then, he led her out. She thought it was an apartment, but it was actually a villa. Outside was a gravel road filled with roses and other flowers. Most of them were roses of various colors. It had opened up a little, and the taste was quite sweet. After walking for a while, they finally walked out of the villa area. This was actually a scenic spot, which was especially famous in the city. Therefore, the villa was also very expensive. The scenic area was more lively. After all, it was a prime location in the city. Roads, shops, and all kinds of facilities were complete. Yi Yuxuan looked calm, as if he was really just taking her out for a walk. He didn't even say much. Seeing that someone was buying milk tea, he also went over and bought a cup. His actions could even be said to be skillful. Then, he took a tissue and wiped the water droplets that had formed on the cup due to the cold before stuffing it into Weiwei Bai's hands. Weiwei Bai felt that the two of them were standing together at this moment. Even if they didn't speak, just the atmosphere was enough. Other people would think that they were a couple. They were even an old couple who had been dating for many years. Weiwei Bai didn't dare to flirt with Yi Yuxuan, but she didn't reject him either. After all, she relied on his life points to eat. But if they were too close, it would be difficult for her to suppress her feelings for Yi Yuxuan. People were alive, not dead. Yi Yuxuan surrounded her like this every day, and he liked her from the bottom of his heart. He was handsome, had a loyal personality, had a good family background, was especially rich, was smart, and had a loyal and honest face. One look and one could tell that he wasn't the type to have an affair. Which woman wouldn't be moved by such a man? He might even be gay. To read the full article at https://www.sashu.com// To read on. Calm. Chapter 21:14. How could Weiwei Bai not have feelings for him? She had feelings for him so much that she wanted to increase her life points and stay away from him. If she was more ruthless, she would be with him while making him a cuckold, so that he wouldn't be seduced by other vixens. But this thought came to her mind when she saw Yi Yuxuan. She sighed in her heart. Forget it. She wasn't so bad that she couldn't even fool Yi Yuxuan. Her life points were 6,500 days last time. Now it was 7,500 days. 20 years, and she was still a short-lived ghost. Wei Wei Bai's eyes dimmed as she drank the cold and sweet milk tea. When she had about 50 to 60 years of life points, she would tell Yi Yuxuan everything. When the time came, if he didn't mind that she had cheated on so many people. She had such a colorful past. Then, this way of thinking was a little wrong. Why did she feel that Yi Yuxuan was an honest person? After she turned over a new leaf, she would look for him to take over. Wei Wei Bai was thinking too much and didn't notice anything else. Until Yi Yuxuan's voice sounded. Is it sweet? Wei Wei Bai nodded perfunctorily. It's sweet. Yi Yuxuan, let me try. Wei Wei Bai didn't think too much. She didn't even look up and handed the milk tea over. In the end, it was a gentle kiss. It was simple and passed by with a touch. She even thought that it was a breeze and not his breath. Yi Yuxuan's expression didn't change, and his voice was calm. It's indeed sweet. Wei Wei Bai's fingers tightened, and the milk tea was squeezed out of the cup. Yi Yuxuan immediately reached out to take the milk tea. There wasn't much left in it, so he threw it into the trash can. Then he took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped her hands. The stickiness of her fingers fell into the gaps between her fingers. He didn't miss a single bit. He carefully wiped and wiped. Wei Wei Bai expressed that she couldn't take it anymore. The honest Yi Yuxuan was no longer shielded by her emotions. Her heartbeat quickened. Although she knew that Yi Yuxuan was deliberately provoking her. However, Wei Wei Bai had no choice but to remain stubborn. She only had 20 years of life, so she couldn't afford to be reckless. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai immediately called out, Tongzi, let's go to battle strategy. Reality is too scary. It's better to dream. It would be fine even if she exploded in this plane. After all, once the strategy was completed, those victims would not be able to find her. However, reality was her home base. If she flirted with Yi Yuxuan, she would not be responsible. What if one day Yi Yuxuan suddenly took things too hard and decided to take her down with him? The host in reality was too cowardly. Damn it, wasn't it just Yi Yuxuan? Flirt back. Just as he was about to instigate her, he saw Yi Yuxuan look up and see him. Team subsystem, he was also terrified. The deranged Yi Yuxuan, no matter where he hid, he was seen by him. There was no way to live, and he could still catch him. Therefore, battle strategy was indeed good. In the emotional fragment strategy, torture him to death. The system immediately whispered in Wei Wei Bai's ear, perhaps it was because he was too close to her. Yi Yuxuan's eyes were as cold as knives. He stared at the system. Because the place where he was standing was against the light. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai could not see the incomparably cold darkness in his eyes. The system immediately flew away from Wei Wei Bai. You know how to glare. You're the best. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://sashu. COMT. Chapter 21:15. When Wei Wei Bai heard the answer, her voice immediately softened a bit. Yi Yuxuan, I'm suddenly sleepy. Yi Yuxuan stepped back and opened his arms. It's okay, I'll hold you. Wei Wei Bai, then her eyes went black. After the system responded, her soul began to slowly leave her body. Sure enough, her body went soft in Yi Yuxuan's arms. He easily picked her up and looked at the system. The system's small body was holding a white mist. It was Wei Wei Bai's soul. Yi Yuxuan felt that the hazy mist was familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Bones and golden light flashed in his mind, and then, he couldn't remember. Take good care of her. Yi Yuxuan's voice was in the dark night. There was a dignified gentleness. The next sentence was full of killing intent. In that so-called dream, don't give me any chance to hurt her. The system was silent, and then said, I'll try. With that, he disappeared in the golden light with her in his arms. All the feathers of light disappeared, leaving behind only a sticky darkness. Yi Yuxuan stood in place for a while, then adjusted Wei Wei Bai's position, and then carried her all the way home. Back home. Bai Changyan and Qin Qiu were watching TV, the kind of mother-in-law and daughter-in-law fight. Bai Changyan, why is this mother-in-law so bad, bullying her daughter-in-law like this? Qin Qiu, it's all like this, otherwise how can there be ratings? Seeing Yi Yuxuan come in with Wei Wei Bai in his arms, Qin Qiu said, fell asleep again. Bai Changyan also took a look, and was relieved to see that his daughter was okay. Yi Yuxuan nodded and was about to enter the room. Suddenly he stopped, thought of something, and said to Qin Qiu, get me some sleeping pills. His sleep was very light and short. 3 or 4 hours a day was enough for him. He wanted to sleep for a longer period of time to see if he could follow the dream and continue his search. He might be able to help Wei Wei. Qin Qiu strangely frowned, are you having insomnia? Yi Yuxuan did not answer. Instead, she turned around and entered the room. Qin Qiu and Bai Changyan looked at each other for a while and were attracted by the TV series again. My wife fought back. She even hit the mistress. Her husband is also a scumbag. He should get a divorce. Buzz buzz buzz, the sound grew louder and louder. At first, Wei Wei Bai thought it was the sound of a mosquito. When he regained his senses, he realized that it was the sound of a helicopter. No, it was a fighter jet. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes and her eyes lit up. Although there was no data input yet, she was already able to handle the situation very well. The people sitting on the plane were all fully armed men. They looked like mercenaries. A thin middle-aged man next to her whispered to her. Doctor, the life source we found this time will definitely be able to activate 0. Wei Wei Bai collected this name quietly. Then, she combined this man's trembling attitude. Her voice turned cold, not necessarily. Don't be too optimistic. Sure enough, the man did not suspect anything. It was as if her indifference was natural. That's right. We've failed more than 100 times. Even number 8 successfully activated his superpower, but 0 still has no reaction. Wei Wei Bai was still calm and pretended to be cool. She was completely indifferent. The system's voice sounded in her ear. I'm coming. I fell just now, so I'm a bit late. //. Chapter 21:16. The red string was too long, he ran too fast, and his pants were too long, so he fell flat on his face. After sending Wei Wei Bai's soul over, he struggled with the red string for a while before arriving. Wei Wei Bai asked, where is this place? The system immediately flipped through the information. Wait, I'll give you the information. Soon, a large amount of information was entered into Wei Wei Bai's mind. Wei Wei Bai reached out and pressed her forehead to ease her headache. After reading the information, she was speechless for a moment before saying, I'm one in this plane. This was an apocalyptic world. But there was no familiar formula for zombies. Instead, the environment was extremely deteriorating, and the land had lost its ability to reproduce. This led to a large number of deaths. Even human reproduction was not possible, and the number of babies born each year was pitifully small. The scariest thing was that the apocalyptic radiation had bred a large number of monsters. They looked like ants, but were dozens of meters tall. Some were flowers, but suddenly opened their fangs. There were also things like Godzilla, aliens, and all kinds of nightmarish things. Anyway, these things liked to eat people. This forced the apocalyptic base to be built. Although the base was built, the apocalyptic environment was facing a situation where there were fewer and fewer people, and the land was deteriorating. To be able to fight monsters. The person in charge of the base started the first stage of the experiment of activating superpowers. And Wei Wei Bai was the most successful superpower in the first stage. Code 1. The next few experiments were all led by Wei Wei Bai and her assistants. She was now the leader of the experimental base. She successfully activated 7 superpowers. They were 2 to 8. But none of the superpowers were as strong as Wei Wei Bai. So Wei Wei Bai started the Zero Plan. She wanted to create an omnipotent, the most powerful superpower in history, similar to a god. Of course, this plan was too big, and until now, there was no hope of success. Because Zero did not have any activation reaction. She was still sleeping in the glass culture tank, motionless. Wei Wei Bai pondered for a moment, and finally said, "Are you saying that my plane is especially awesome?" The system said, "This is the reward from the previous plane, rewarding you with the power of space." It was really a reward, it did not buy it. It could not afford it. He didn't know how this sudden reward had come to him. It could not be delivered to Wei Wei Bai. The system thought of Yi Yuxuan. Maybe Yi Yuxuan had awakened a little, so Wei Wei Bai could get the reward. Wei Wei Bai, power of space. The system sent a document on the power of space to Bai Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai looked and found it was indeed powerful. The so-called power of space was not the kind of space farming. Instead, it was because she could appear and disappear at will. She could even hide in space-time cracks. Although there was a limit to how long he could hide, to humans, this was already close to the power of a god. Therefore, among all the superpowered people, her superpower was the strongest. Bai Wei Wei finally nodded, "Oh, I understand. So in this plane, this old lady can finally kill in all directions. If I want to raise a little wolf dog, I can raise a little wolf dog. If I want to beat up whoever I want to beat up, I don't have to live in fear." Even the person in charge of the base had to be respectful to her. So, in this plane, she could do whatever she wanted. The system was the host's focus not on who to conquer. She went astray. Back at the base, the skinny man was called 135, and helped carry a box. Inside was the source of life for Zero. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://sashu.com//the. Chapter 21:17. In the apocalypse, most people's names were numbered. Only the people at the top had the right to have a name. Wei Wei Bai was considered one of the people at the top, so no one called her number 1, but Doctor. Or a name. The base in the Yellow Desert was very large, the entire experimental base was built with white materials. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless as she walked into the laboratory indifferently. There were all kinds of rooms in the long corridor. In the hall not far away, there were large round glass culture tanks, filled with all kinds of strange experimental subjects. There were even monster innards. Damn, eating in this place was disgusting. Of course, as a cold sister, Wei Wei Bai acted as if she didn't see anything. 135 said, "Doctor, if we don't succeed in activating Zero this time, we might have to give up on the plan. Zero's plan used up too many resources. If it didn't succeed, they would have to stop." Wei Wei Bai was neither cold nor warm. "If it fails, I will take responsibility." 135 immediately sighed in relief. Wei Wei Bai, who is the target? The person in charge of the base. There was no target in the data. The system was about to speak, but shouted, "Be careful, Wei Wei." Countless transparent blades stabbed towards her chest. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless as she disappeared in an instant. The air turned into countless blades, twisting into a ball. The cold sound of killing could be heard from the corridor. A man jumped down from the ceiling and shouted arrogantly, "Get the hell out here, I will kill you today." Suddenly, he heard movement in the air, and turned his head in an instant, his face full of excitement. The air turned into chains, trying to grab Wei Wei Bai. But in the next moment, all of his movements froze. A hand strangely appeared from the air, grabbing his neck, almost crushing his Adam's apple. The attack in the air also disappeared. Wei Wei Bai slowly appeared, her face was cold, and there was no emotion in her eyes. She didn't say a word, and just threw him. He crashed into one of the rooms, and the door immediately closed. Number 7 has an irritable personality. He broke public property and will be grounded for a month. Banging sounds immediately came from the room. "Let me out, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." Wei Wei Bai took his box under the admiring gazes of 1, 3, and 5 and then walked out calmly. Yes, according to the information. When she was doing experiments, she did all kinds of heartless things to these pitiful psychics, torturing them until they were better off dead. As a result, those superpowered people hated her to the core after surviving. Every day, he would think about how to get rid of her. That number 7 had awakened the air arcana, and there was actually air in the human body. If he trained his superpower even more, this ability would be considered to be especially heaven-defying. Killing any living creature would not be a problem. However, her space force allowed her to avoid all arcana attacks. Therefore, his air attack had no effect on her. No wonder she was given such an ability. If she wasn't the strongest, she would have to die. Wei Wei Bai chatted with the system. "Looks like I'll have to work hard on this plane again." Every single one of them had a grudge against her. Was this appropriate? It wasn't like he was the target of the strategy. Strategy target discovered. This mission is to obtain Zero's love. Target, 0. Progress, 0. Time, 3 years. Wei Wei Bai stopped in her tracks. The strategy target this time was a psychic. She even used him for experiments. Thinking of number 7, this Zero wouldn't hate her to death, right? Wei Wei Bai said, "Is it going to be a love-hate relationship again? I didn't do a lot of horrible experiments to that Zero, did I?" The system said, "He wouldn't know what you did. He hasn't awakened yet." Wei Wei Bai said, "Hasn't awakened? Does that mean he's in a vegetative state?" There was too much information, and she didn't know who the strategy target was. She didn't look at the experiment data in detail. The system paused. "Take a few steps forward." Wei Wei Bai took a few steps forward and arrived at a huge hall. A bunch of scientists were running around with complicated instruments. There were also all kinds of conspicuous culture tanks. "Take a few more steps forward." Wei Wei Bai took a few more steps forward. The system gestured for her to look at the most conspicuous and biggest glass barrel in the middle of the hall. Do you see it? Wei Bai looked at the glass barrel blankly. A huge egg was floating in the middle of the culture tank. All kinds of tubes were connected to the egg. The system said, "Zero is an egg now. He doesn't have any consciousness. He can't possibly hate you." Wei Bai stared at the egg blankly for a while. Finally, she couldn't help but say, "If you want me to attack an egg, why won't you let me go to heaven?" The code name was Zero. It was really Zero. A zero egg. Crossover system, my Adonis, come over here. Crossover system, my Adonis, come over here, /crossover system, my Adonis, come over here. Crossover system, my Adonis, come over here. Download the at https://m/com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Crossover system, my Adonis, come over here, comma. Chapter 21:18. Wei Bai felt that she had to slow down. She stood calmly in front of the egg. Ah, what a big egg. It would take more than 10 big plates to hold it if it was cooked. She wondered which hen had given birth to it. No, Wei Bai felt that she was excited. After all, conquering a big egg was beyond her imagination. She felt that she had experienced so many planes, so many storms. She would not be surprised by anything. But he didn't think of the strategy for this plane. His brain was so big that it was leaking out. Wei Bai finally had no choice but to ask the system, does this thing have a consciousness? How could she conquer an egg? Not to mention 3 years, even if she gave her 300 years, she would not be able to make an egg like her. Was this something a human would do? She would need another egg to conquer it. After all, in the eyes of the egg, another egg might look like its own kind. The system saw that its host was going crazy. It immediately said, "Isn't this an experiment? It hasn't hatched yet. We'll conquer it after it hatches." Wei Bai was desperate, conquer it after it hatches. What if it hatches a chicken, duck, or goose? The system said, maybe it's an angel. They all have wings. Let's be optimistic. Someone walked over, "Doctor, Zero still has not awakened its consciousness. If it can't be awakened this time, should we continue the project or stop it?" Wei Bai saw another scientist, who was also her assistant. Her face was calm and mature. There was no expression on her fair and delicate face. "We'll see how it goes after this experiment. I went out and got more than a liter of life source. Start the activation program and inject the life source into Zero's body." She was going to say eggshell. The assistant immediately nodded and ran away. Start the activation program immediately. Wei Bai passed the life source to the person next to her and injected it. The life source was a special kind of energy. It was only found in a fountain in the middle of a big salt field called the Origin. That was the monster's nest. The life source had a special advantage, which was that it could nourish the body of the ability user. Moreover, it would stimulate the special abilities of the Esper faster. Back then, they had used many kinds of materials before finally confirming that life source was the best energy source. However, this item was very difficult to obtain because monsters with special abilities were everywhere in monster nests. It was only because Wei Bai led the team that they were able to bring this thing back safely. Because Zero had used up too much of his life force, some of the Espers who had just awakened their abilities did not have enough energy to replenish their energy and were unable to awaken the next stage of their abilities. Therefore, the person in charge of the base, Amy, decided that if they couldn't activate it this time, they would give up on this overly expensive project. Wei Bai was still waiting for the eggs to hatch. If he stopped, would she really have to hug this dead egg and play nice with him? Therefore, she flipped through all kinds of information about the experimental base. After getting a general understanding, she immediately walked to the side of the culture glass tank and opened a sleeping chamber that could fit one person. 135 just ran over and was shocked. "Doctor, what are you doing?" Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. "Enter Zero's consciousness and see if you can stimulate it and guide its consciousness." She didn't know if it was a man or a woman, or if it wasn't a person at all. There was no mistake in using it. 135 immediately squeezed over with a few other scientists. // Chapter 21:19. Doctor, this is very risky. Zero's consciousness is blank, you can be swallowed if you're not careful. This experiment has been done before. Several people's consciousnesses were swallowed by Zero and turned into idiots. "No, doctor, let others go, you don't have to go." After all, Wei Wei Bai was the core leader of the experimental base. Although those superpowered people wanted nothing more than to kill her. But the scientists admired her very much. Without her, the superpowered experiment would not have succeeded. Even if Zero's plan failed, the success of the other 7 superpowered people. It was enough for their experimental base to survive in the apocalypse with pride. There was more than one survival base for humans. So far, only their base had superpowered people who had succeeded in the experiment. Most of the credit went to Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai straightforwardly stuck some equipment links to her forehead and said coldly, "Shut up. When is it up to you to deny my decision?" She was the one who had the final say here. She would do whatever she said. Sure enough, as soon as this sentence was spoken, everyone obediently shut up and didn't dare to make a sound. Wei Wei Bai closed the hibernation chamber, closed her eyes, and said to the system, "If my consciousness is swallowed, remember to guide me back." The system said, "Don't worry, this is easy." Zero was a very dangerous existence. Wei Wei Bai had the system, so she was a little more confident. In the hall, in the huge glass culture tank, the huge egg floated quietly. The source of life was sent into Zero's eggshell through the delivery tube of the nutrient solution. A few scientists were already busy. "Pay attention to the activation program. Has the doctor's consciousness entered?" "Yes." "Okay, when necessary, forcibly stop the experiment. We can't let the doctor's consciousness be swallowed." "Okay, everyone pay attention, make sure there is enough nutrient solution, observe the consciousness activation program data." Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. When Wei Wei Bai closed her eyes to sleep, she immediately entered a white hazy place. It was boundless, it was white everywhere. There were no animals or plants, no sky or earth. It was just white. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her chin speechlessly. This target. Could he be an idiot? His brain was actually white. Wei Wei Bai flipped through the information from scratch. It seemed that there was nothing special in the beginning. It was just a simple fertilized egg fusion. Then, the fertilized egg was injected with the strongest and most powerful superpower fluid in history. Other espers would probably only be able to identify 1 or 2 types of esper fluid. In the end, if he succeeded, he would only activate one ability. But the original owner had a crazy idea. She wanted to create a psychic with many abilities. However, the human body was too fragile. Even if it had been strengthened, it would not be able to withstand the ravages of so many different abilities. Therefore, the original owner injected Zero with the blood of the king of monsters, an invincible Vajra that could command all monsters. Back then, he had tried everything he could, but he had only managed to make the Monster King lose a little bit of HP. This little bit of HP was all given to Zero. He did not expect that Zero, who was injected with the monster's blood, would turn from a viviparous embryo to an egg. No matter how much nutrients it was given, the egg only grew bigger. But it was still an egg. Not to mention an ability, there was not even a crack in the eggshell. Wei Wei Bai walked in the white space for a long time and felt that it was about time. Should I come again next time? /T. Chapter 21:20. This damned place felt like it wouldn't be finished even if one walked for 100 years. No wonder some people became idiots because it was easy to get lost in this place. Wei Wei Bai was about to call out to the system when she suddenly heard the sound of bouncing. Under her feet, there was also a slight tremor. It was as if the earth was trembling. Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked down at her feet. On the white ground, something like a tree root suddenly appeared. Countless tree roots trembled slightly as she followed these root-like things forward. The bouncing sound became more and more obvious. It sounded like the sound of a huge heartbeat. Wei Wei Bai's mind was a little muddled as she was seduced by this sound. It was clearly just the sound of a heartbeat. But it was like a sweet song that she had never heard before. It was full of temptation, depravity, darkness, mystery, and irresistible happiness. Wei Wei Bai vaguely heard it. Come here, let me hug you. Come here, my girl. Her eyes lost focus, as if she was being seduced. The voice seemed to be getting more and more excited. Come here. Wei Wei Bai heard that the voice seemed to be close to her ear, and that sweet voice came over. It also turned into an evil excitement. I caught you. Ah! Wei Wei Bai slapped it. She, who had a strong consciousness, was as violent as Godzilla here. Although she couldn't see anything, if something strange touched her body, she would beat it violently in the direction of that thing. So Bai Wei Wei, in the middle of the white mist, grabbed something that she didn't know what it was. She beat it with her hands and feet. Caught me. What's so fun about hide and seek? Let's wrestle and box. Pretending to be mysterious. Wasn't it just an egg? She couldn't take care of those perverted strategists, not even an egg. She might as well follow the system home and sell sweet potatoes. The thing in her hand screamed and suddenly disappeared. The white mist dissipated, and Wei Wei Bai finally saw clearly that she was standing next to a huge heart. That heart continued to beat. It was extremely strange, and that thing just now had entered this heart. Wei Wei Bai was speechless as she looked at his big heart. It was really hard to explain. A timid voice suddenly sounded in his heart. Who are you? Her voice was tender and childlike. Wei Wei Bai pondered for a moment, and a mischievous thought rose in her heart. It's your mother. However, when she thought of an egg calling her mother every day, others would think that she was a hen. She shuddered, goosebumps rising all over her body. Forget it, Wei Wei Bai said with a calm face and disdain. I'm your master, the one who takes care of you every day. When are you going to wake up? What's the use of keeping you if you only eat and don't work? She had guessed it. The voice in the heart was the consciousness of the egg. The system did not follow her into her consciousness and waited for her outside. She could only make wild guesses based on her rich experience. Wake up, Wei Wei Bai nodded. If you don't wake up, I'm going to abandon you and raise other eggs. The egg was a little anxious. You're not going to play with me anymore. Wei Wei Bai, you're so weak, what's there to play with? I'm leaving first. After saying that, Wei Wei Bai turned around and left without hesitation. The egg immediately said, Don't go, I'm so bored, there's nothing here. Wei Wei Bai, what does it have to do with me? The egg was dispirited. I like you, can you stay? As soon as he said that, those root-like things suddenly moved. Chapter 21:21. Wei Wei Bai stomped on the ground and kicked away a few tree roots that were trying to wrap around her. She then turned around and smiled coldly at the heart. His delicate and fair face had been expressionless the entire time. At this moment, his smile was like a cold light in a white hell. It was breathtaking. If you like me, then wake up and play with me. Wei Wei Bai called out softly, "Si Bao." She opened her eyes as soon as she finished. The system whispered in her ear, "Don't call him that, it's too unpleasant." Wei Wei Bai exhaled slowly. "I was almost entangled just now, this egg is a tough one." But her consciousness was only a few years old, it was very childish. With this kind of IQ, it would be easy to coax. Just now, in her consciousness, if she did not run fast enough, she would have been entangled. The system said, "Don't take this kind of risk next time, your consciousness is the most important thing to you." Wei Wei Bai said, "I don't want to take the risk, but you can't expect me to attack an unconscious egg." Just as she finished speaking. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15. Wei Wei Bai. The system said, "Damn, why is it so high?" Wei Wei Bai thought for a while and understood that egg's IQ is very low. "I just coaxed it and it immediately liked me." Just like a child, liking someone would cause the favorability to skyrocket. There were no conflicts of interest, nor were there so many twists and turns. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that attacking an egg was really good. In the empty land of consciousness, the sound of an intense debate came from the heart. That childish voice shouted, "I like her, I want to play with her." Another incomparably languid voice rang out, "I like her too, especially when she smiles. I really want to tear her apart." An irritable voice said, "I'm hungry, I want to go out too, I want to eat, I want to kill." In the voices of their heated debate, a cold, magnetic, and deep male voice sounded. Insufficient nutrition, unable to awaken. As soon as this voice came out, the rest of the voices immediately fell silent. The deep voice said faintly, "Continue sleeping. I like her. I want to be with her." His childish voice sounded a little scared. "I want to be with her. She was the first to enter this place, and the first to not be afraid of it. A creature that smiled at it." The low voice sounded extremely rational. "Is it because of the fledgling complex? We all have this kind of dependency complex. She was the first creature we saw, and she was indeed our mother." The childish voice said, "But she said that she is our master." "What is a master?" The deep voice sounded again. "It's the God that controls everything." The word God carried a dark and evil aura. The voice that controlled everything was still cold and indifferent as it said to the childish voice, "Wake up first, we will continue to sleep. If you suddenly don't like our God, you can kill him." What if she likes it? They didn't understand the answer. He fell into a deep sleep due to lack of nutrition. The unconscious egg in the culture tank suddenly moved. On the monitoring equipment, various data exploded like crazy. A few of the equipment couldn't withstand this sudden surge and actually exploded. The scientists immediately shouted in surprise. Zero's consciousness has been activated. Wei Wei Bai, who had just climbed out of the sleep chamber, looked at the glass culture tank. The egg suddenly made an innocent voice like a child. "Master, I'm here to play with you." Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Wei Wei Bai and the system, it wasn't strange that the egg could talk. What was strange was that the favorability climbed so quickly. Chapter 21-22. The entire laboratory was overjoyed to announce that Zero had awakened her consciousness. They had succeeded in this miraculous experiment. Team Dr. Zero's follow-up research continued. And the main person in charge of this research was Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai applied for more life sources from her superiors. The person in charge, me, immediately approved. After all, if Zero's ability was successfully developed, it would be much easier for their base to survive in the apocalypse. Zero's awakened consciousness was only a child of a few years old. But for the leader of the base, this kind of ability user was easy to control. Now, among the ability users, only number 2, number 4, number 5, and number 8 listened to orders. The remaining few, especially number 7, would not listen to anything he said. He was still thinking about Wei Wei Bai's life every day. Wei Wei Bai flipped through the proposal and chatted with Zero. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Zero's voice was soft. I feel that my heart is beating very fast, and the blood in my veins is flowing very fast. When you're beside me, my body even feels numb. Wei Wei Bai, ? Then she looked up at the egg. After a moment of silence, she said, You're blushing. Actually, the egg was red. Above the middle of the egg, there were 2 blushes. It was cute and scary. Zero, I'm blushing. What's wrong with me? Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. You're lovesick. You're like this when you see me. It means that you're devout and obedient to me. You like me when you see me. Whatever I say is right. Zero was silent for a while before she realized. So I want to obey you. That's why I'm like this. Bite abduct idiot thick-skinned Vivian nodded calmly. Yes, is it because when I talk to you, you feel numb all over, comfortable everywhere, and warm all over? This is because you worship me very much and want to obey me very much. In this world. Wei Wei Bai also didn't think of the road of love. In front of a few years old egg, no matter how dedicated she was, she couldn't eat it. Moreover, the child's IQ was 0, so he needed an elder. If she could play the role of a good mother, she could also get 100 kinship points. The reason why other planes couldn't use kinship strategies was because they had all grown up. No matter how much he lacked kinship, he wouldn't give full kinship to someone. That was several times more difficult than love. However, Zero was a special target. Wei Wei Bai was very confident. A child's IQ was 0. What she relied on the most at this moment was kinship. The system also said that Zero's current 25 favorability points were similar to the value of kinship. Zero was silent for a moment before asking, What does it feel like to be electrocuted? Is it as comfortable as I am now? Wei Wei Bai pulled some wires outside the culture tank. This is the wire that powers your energy source. There's electricity inside. Just as she finished speaking, the wires suddenly floated up. Zero asked curiously, Is it inside? After saying that, countless wires exploded, and the laboratory fell into darkness. Countless electric arcs were drawn from the wires and entered the egg. The glass culture tank was about to explode. Wei Wei Bai suddenly shouted, Stop, Zero. Zero paused, and all the wires fell. The laboratory's backup battery was immediately connected, and countless new wires were pulled in for emergency repair. Within a minute, all the electricity was restored. However, this also caused a lot of losses. For example, the experimental subjects died immediately after the nutrition was delivered. / Chapter 21-23. Several scientists cried out in dismay, and some even came to ask Wei Wei Bai for help. Bai Wei Wei had a headache and rubbed her temples, sending away a bunch of people who came to complain. Then, she said coldly, Zero, you can't suddenly explode like this in the future. Zero's voice weakened. My body doesn't feel anything even after the electric shock, so what Master said is wrong. Bai Wei Wei calmly duped, Because I am a unique existence to you, so other than me, nothing in this world, no one can give you this kind of comfortable feeling. Zero was stunned for a while, as if it was thinking about something. But its IQ was too low, so it couldn't understand. It just felt that Wei Bai was right. What she said was right. Zero said sweetly, I want to be more comfortable, master. Wei Bai raised her eyebrows and said with a bit of affection, how do you want to be comfortable? System, is this driving? What a shameful line. Zero was a little shy, and the blush on its eggshell became more obvious. I want to see you smile at me. Wei Bai was expressionless, she wanted to laugh at the sky. She had never seen a strategy with such a low requirement. In the past, the strategy was, you take off XX, we'll do XX. Or I'll lock you up, and if you dare to escape, we'll break your legs. In the end, she almost couldn't recognize the symbol XX. The corners of Bai Weiwei's mouth twitched without batting an eyelid. Then, she revealed the perfect smile of someone who had roamed the Jianghu for many years. Her lips, which were originally straight and serious, curved up sweetly like cherry branches. Her red lips, on her fair face, had a soul-stirring beauty. Her cold and indifferent eyes also curved slightly. Her eyes were clear, and stars fell into her eyes. Zero suddenly stopped responding, and even the blush on its eggshell disappeared. The whole egg was soaked in the nutrient solution, and it was very quiet. Wei Bai naturally put away her charming smile and returned to her usual serious and indifferent self. She glanced at the time and said, all right, that's all for today. I'll come back tomorrow. Wei Bai picked up some Doomsday Warrior teaching materials and was just about to turn around and leave. Suddenly, a dark and lingering sigh came from behind him. I do, Wei Bai frowned. Zero's voice. Just as she turned around, she heard the voice screaming in excitement. I really like it. The constraints of the fledgling plot, as well as the softest feelings, suddenly poured out of the nest at this moment. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 50. Wei Bai. After this scream, a huge wave of energy came from the culture tank. All the instruments let out a sharp warning sound, and all the wires and tubes burst open. Not only did this force break through the protective shield of the laboratory, but the remaining force also spread to the human base not far away. Several men from the mercenary group were seriously injured by this power. The people in the laboratory were the first to bear the brunt. Although they were wearing protective suits, everyone was hit to the ground and vomited blood. The only one who was not affected was Wei Bai. There was not a trace of pressure around her. Only Zero acted like a spoiled child. Master, smile again, I like it so much. Wei Bai expressed that the increase in favorability made her scared. And this power continued to be released. Then except for her, everyone was finished. Wei Bai immediately stopped it. Zero, stop. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here, / fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Chapter 21-24. Zero, I can't stop, I'm so excited, so happy. Wei Bai, you're still a child. A crazy child who is like a nuclear weapon from the apocalypse. Once you get angry, you want a bunch of people to die with you. Wei Bai suddenly became gentle. She walked in front of the glass trough and put her hand on the glass. Her saintly smile was reflected in the glass. Do you like lullabies? Zero, I'll sing for you. The best way to calm it down was to sleep. Zero's excitement continued, but its attention was diverted. Its power also weakened a bit. Lullaby. Wei Wei Bai continued, good children like it. Listen to my voice and be quiet. Zero quieted down a bit, but its power was still released. Wei Wei Bai suddenly sang in a low voice. This body's voice was very soft and sweet. It was just that the doctor's image was too scary. The original body's appearance was good, and her voice was also good. They were both very sweet girls. So when she became gentle and sang softly, it was like a feather falling, soft and unbelievably beautiful. This was a simple ballad from the apocalypse. The tune was simple and the lyrics were a few lines back and forth. In the dark silk, I hold you in my arms, we fall into the eternal night. The apocalypse was indeed the apocalypse, even a lullaby was so dark. Zero quieted down and its power slowly disappeared. That egg, slowly, was pressed against the glass. The huge eggshell was pressed against Wei Wei Bai's palm. It was like she was stroking it. A sweet dream. It whispered, Master, you are my God. Ding, the male lead's affection is at 70. Wei Wei Bai, there was something wrong with the favorable impression points. It was too fast. There had never been a world that could be this fast. Could it be that she had been wrong in the past? She should have been focusing on kinship instead of love. Or was it that the main system of this world saw that she was working too hard and finally had a conscience and gave her a target for the sweet biscuit? Wei Wei Bai was suspicious. How could the main system be so kind? She sang it over 10 times and finally coaxed the egg to sleep. The laboratory was a complete mess. The medical team quickly entered and carried the scientists out. Wei Wei Bai was not injured at all. She stood indifferently in front of the culture tank with a cold expression. She was actually just chatting with the system. I've only been with this egg for a week. Other than chatting with it and teaching it some doomsday rules, I haven't done anything else, so how did her favorability suddenly soar to 70? The system also flipped through the information, but the information was incomplete. After all, some hidden information would not be released if the side quests were not released. Furthermore, the consciousness of that egg was hidden very deeply. If the system wanted to find out what the egg was thinking, it had to leave Wei Wei Bai. He was doing such a loss-making job, so he couldn't figure out why his favorability increased so quickly. The system tried to find a reason. It can't be the egg's nestling complex, right? Some eggs treat the first person they meet as their mother, so children have a natural affection for their mother. Especially the younger the child, the purer and higher the natural affection for their mother. Bai Weiwei thought about it and agreed with the system's words. But the answer just came out. Then, he heard a series of favorability notifications. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 10. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 25. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Wei Wei Bai and the system fell into a deep state of doubt. That. Is your favorability notification broken? Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. And transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 21-25. The system had already taken out a pile of repair tools with a sad face. The indicator has at least 200,000 life points, please don't break. When I bought it, I bought the best one, and the shelf life was also 10,000 years. In the end, it broke. When Wei Wei Bai heard that it had 200,000 life points, it was possible to buy a new one. She could only let the system repair it. Wei Wei Bai, no wonder I felt that there was something wrong with the favorability indicator. It jumped so high all of a sudden, it should be the indicator that broke. I guess the egg's favorability is only about 20. The indicator was broken, she guessed it herself. Because this was the first time she encountered such a problem. Way by and the system didn't think of anything else at all. They were discussing how to fix the indicator. And in the eggshell. In the land of consciousness, a hysterical voice came from the huge heart. I want to eat her, she is so sweet, so pure, so delicious. A lazy voice, charming and seductive, sounded. I want to hug her, I want to press her against the dark silk, tear her clothes, and let her fall into the eternal night I weave forever. An evil, depraved, and eternal night full of desire. And that childish voice sounded angrily. Don't touch her, she is my master, my God, my everything. No matter how soft a child was, they would protect their own master like their mother. All kinds of voices made a sharp noise again. Finally, that incomparably indifferent voice, with a trace of displeasure, sounded. Do you all like her? This question received unprecedented unanimous agreement. All the voices converged into one sentence, like, no matter how much or little they liked. They all liked. The leader's voice that controlled everything finally softened a little. If you like, then work hard to wake up. That trace of gentleness suddenly became cold and ruthless. Then go and get her. Way Bai, who was reporting in a meeting, felt a chill on the back of her neck, as if she was being stared at by something. She was startled, but quickly adjusted her state of mind and continued to report. After the report, the person in charge of the base, Amy, an old man with a head of silver hair, said amiably, Wei, stay behind after the meeting. There was surprisingly little information about the old man. Wei Bai felt that those with very little information were either passers-by or demon kings with good side quests. Wei Bai's face was indifferent as she nodded and said, okay. After the people left, the old man AI me led by Wei out. Wei, Zero's ability is unexpectedly strong. The Source of Life sent out 3 mercenary groups, and we also managed to get some. Wei Bai nodded. I think we should leave the Source of Life for Zero first. The rest of the Aspers should focus on training and leveling up. Amy nodded and smiled. I'm not worried about leaving Zero's plan to you. Develop its potential as soon as possible. Wei Bai said, it has great potential. I will do my best. AI Meet suddenly asked casually, did you see anything in Zero's mind? Wei Bai said, there's nothing but a vast expanse of white. AI Me couldn't help but reveal a smug smile. Although I didn't see anything, it still stimulated Zero's mind. You really are my favorite, assistant. Wei Bai withdrew the coldness in her eyes and revealed a smile of admiration. It's my honor to work for you, master. Wei Bai took the information and left. AI Mi's kind smile turned cold as expected. Her eyes were full of complacency and a cold smile. / Chapter 21-26. Once Zero's plan succeeded, the world would be under his control. Even Wei Bai didn't know what the blood of the monster king in Zero's body was, or what the various energy sources were. That was something to create a godlike creature. Once it successfully broke out of its shell, Zero would have no opponents in this world. Everyone would have to crawl in front of it. Moreover, Zero had a genetic modification, which was the modification of the chick complex. It would treat the first person it saw as its parents. It would feel close to that person from the bottom of its heart, and it would have a natural desire to possess and protect that person. The lower its IQ, the more dependent it would be on the first person it met. And Zero's IQ was only a few years old. As long as it had enough nutrition, the first person it saw when the eggshell broke, it would be easy to control everything about it. AI Me spent so many years and created such a good assistant like Wei Bai. It was all for the success of this godlike plan. As long as it succeeded, he, who controlled Zero, would be the true god of this world. He heard that Wei Wei Bai had entered Zero's consciousness and was worried that she would see Zero. So he called Wei Wei Bai over and asked her to make sure that she didn't see anything. Me heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't let anything enter Zero's consciousness in the future, including Wei Wei Bai. After Wei Wei Bai walked out, she said to the system, "There's something wrong with this old man." That villainous smile on his face. Although Me had tried his best to pretend to be amiable, but in front of Wei Wei Bai, he was still a little too inexperienced to play with her. That sinister little eyes, that cold smile that twitched from time to time. Also, when he asked her if she had seen anything in the land of consciousness, that made her nervous. Of course, Wei Wei Bai wouldn't tell the truth. So when she said that she didn't see anything, the old man actually relaxed. Strange, she didn't see anything. Why was he so happy? The system flipped through the information. His information is incomplete. It should be related to the subsequent side quests. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Pay more attention to him. I'll go take a look at Zero. Although the favorability indicator was broken. However, Zero's favorability was indeed very easy to increase. After all, she was only a child of a few years. Chat with it and tell it a few jokes. Or singing a song would make it very happy. There was no need to sell their bodies, labor, or acting skills. What a wonderful plane. Wei Wei Bai came to the glass trough in the middle of the hall and said with a smile, "Zero, I brought you snacks." She poured the source of life into the nutrient solution and sent it into the eggshell through the tube. The eggshell glowed faintly. Wei Wei Bai poured the snacks and took off her gloves. She flipped open the book. Today, we're going to identify the monsters of the apocalypse. This is the picture book. After that, she placed the album on the glass. This is a man-eating flower beast. It looks very beautiful like a flower, but if people walk in, they will be eaten. She patiently taught it. It was as natural as teaching a child that this was a triangle and this was a circle. Zero didn't say anything. He didn't look as excited as he usually did when he saw her. Was he asleep? Wei Wei Bai smiled and was about to put the album away. Zero suddenly spoke up, "That number 7, what is it?" Wei Wei Bai glanced at it. It's a prison vine. This vine is one of the most resilient plants in the apocalypse. It's harmless. The only downside is that once you're wrapped around by it, it's very hard to get rid of it. Apart from a certain kind of silver knife that can cut it open, there's no other way. And that kind of knife is very rare. And those who can't escape can only starve to death. Zero, then what about number 11? Wei Wei Bai, the Monster King is the leader of all monsters, he's very powerful. Zero, is he as powerful as me? Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but smile gently, her eyes shining brightly. No, in my eyes, you're the most powerful and the best in the world. For the sake of favorability, casually speaking sweet nothings was as simple as eating and drinking for Wei Wei Bai. Zero was silent for a long time. He didn't scream in excitement, nor did he say anything sweet. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that today's Zero was a bit quiet. Suddenly, the favorability prompt sounded. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15. Wei Wei Bai, 70, 15. The prompt was indeed hopelessly broken. Wei Wei Bai was about to continue teaching when Zero suddenly made an excited sound. Master, I like you so much. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 75. Wei Wei Bai, then she knocked on the system. Hurry up and fix it, I'm confused by these favorability points. The system was knocking on the prompt. Don't worry, I promise to fix it. And inside the eggshell, that incomparably calm voice sounded. She's very good. After that, it went back to sleep. The other two voices started arguing again. Big brother went out, fourth brother also went out, now it's my turn. Scram, it's my turn, I'm starving. And outside the eggshell, Wei Wei Bai was seriously singing a ballad to Zero. From time to time, she would also check when the system fixed the prompt. It was really a peaceful and beautiful plane to conquer. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full text, https://www.sashu.com download the full text, https://www.sashu.com download the full text, https://sashu.com. Chapter 21-27. After Wei Wei Bai finished singing the song for the egg, she said to it, I need to go out soon. I'll be gone for about a month. The stimulation of the life source to Zero wasn't big enough. The instrument data even showed that it was malnourished. Wei Wei Bai felt that this thing really didn't know what caused it. Other ability users could already fly with a little bit of life source. But this egg ate so much, yet it was still malnourished. Of course, as a person who wanted to max out the affection points, Wei Wei Bai was very careful about the child's psychology of the egg. For example, she must tell it first before going out. She didn't want the egg to think that she didn't want it. Zero said softly, why do you want to leave, Wei Wei Bai? Ever since Wei Wei Bai felt that it was easier to communicate by name, it began to call her by name. Wei Wei Bai's originally serious and cold face softened, because of you. She had to subdue an egg that was only a few years old. She had to understand the psychology of children. For example, if others were cold, she would smile at it. Only in this way could she satisfy the psychological needs of children. Sometimes, children's possessiveness was stronger than adults. Adults at least knew how to pretend and know how to be hypocritical and modest. And children haven't learned the manners of civilized society. The color of the egg turned red again. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to look worried. Her eyelashes were half closed, and the thick shadow made her eyes look even more sad. Your body has been in a state where it can't mature. Ordinary nutrition has no effect on you. I heard that the blood of the Monster King is the best thing in the world. Others don't dare to attack the Monster King, but for you, I plan to go myself. Actually, it was that old man AI Mi's suggestion. She wasn't going alone, but she was going with 4 ability users. After all, Zero had been unable to mature and hatch. That old man AI Mi was more anxious than her. The old man's information had always been incomplete. In everyone's evaluation, he was a good person, especially kind. But Wei Wei Bai flipped through the information. That old man was simply white and black. Was he really so kind that he would conduct such a tragic human experiment? Would they send so many people to their deaths just for the source of life? And she realized that these tragic things were all her fault. It was the old man who had given the order, so she would be given the biggest share of the credit in the end. The original owner was very grateful to the old man. She had even forgotten about the torture she had experienced when she was experimented on by the old man. However, after analyzing the information, Wei Wei Bai felt that the old man was trying to trick her. Now that she had taken the credit, it would be better for her to carry out these experiments in the future and send people to their deaths. It was all her doing. Wei Wei Bai felt that in this plane, Zero, who had been conquered, was a sweet cookie. The biggest problem should be a great villain like AI Mi. Zero's voice was soft and sobbing. I want to go with you, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai looked at the eggshell affectionately. It's very dangerous there. I'll go by myself. I'll be back soon. Zero, can you not go? I'll continue to sleep and not wake up. That way, I can save on nutrition. Its awakening consumed a lot of nutrients. As a result, the other three brothers were forced to sleep. Wei Wei Bai's smile became even gentler. She slowly shook her head, her eyes gentle and beautiful. But I want you to stay awake. That way, I can talk to you and sing for you. You are the only beautiful existence in this broken world. Wei Wei Bai stretched out her hands and slowly hugged the glass trough, as if she was hugging it. For you, I'll do anything. So you have to take good care of yourself. I'll be back as soon as possible. Chapter 21-28. The lines on Zero's body, the nutrient tube. Everything started to shake. Wei Wei Bai comforted it in a low voice, I'll be back after you sleep. She was afraid that it would cause the experimental base to lose power again. Zero, I can absorb the nutrients myself, I don't need you. Its voice calmed down, and the sweetness just now seemed to have disappeared. Wei Wei Bai's eyes moved slightly, and a trace of something was wrong flashed in her heart. But she couldn't figure out where this trace of something was wrong came from. Wei Wei Bai's eyes stared straight at Zero through the clear nutrient solution. I'm your creator, of course I'm responsible for everything about you. You're still young, the most important thing to do is to learn, sleep, and grow. She treated it as a child. A child that had to be protected. This strong sense of protection made Zero silent. Wei Wei Bai was just about to wave goodbye and get rid of the trouble of raising a child. Zero's voice was low and peaceful. I want to sleep, sing me a song. Wei Wei Bai smiled, crossed her arms and nodded, only you can ask me so casually, I'm willing. Then she sang a lullaby in a low voice. A familiar, sweet, and gentle voice. It slowly flowed through the entire laboratory. Some assistants and scientists couldn't help but listen. Their incomparably cold doctor would only be so gentle to Zero. Zero slowly fell into a deep sleep. All the data became incomparably peaceful. Suddenly, Zero's voice was very soft, you're very good. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Wei Wei Bai was very calm about this kind of spastic favorability prompt. The system was still working hard to repair the prompt. The Monster King seemed to have reached the time to reproduce and die, so AI Me asked her to lead a team to kill the Monster King. Everyone knew that the Monster King would give birth to a new Monster King at this time. Then it would complete the mission and die, which was also the Monster King's most vulnerable time. Wei Wei Bai wore a thick combat suit, long-sleeved pants, and protective goggles. Then she carried a special laser gun and followed the team on the road. The ability users this time were 2, 3, 4, 5. Their names were easy to remember, but their abilities were varied. She was the boss, so she didn't say anything along the way. The system monitored AI Me and Egg situation. The abnormal favorability and AI Me's villainous setting. This made Wei Wei Bai very vigilant. The system said, the egg fell into a deep slumber, but I didn't invade its consciousness. I wonder what it's doing in the egg. Wei Wei Bai, can you see whether it's a person or a chicken in the egg? The system said, it looks like a human, but because it's soaked in an unknown liquid, it's hard to be sure. Maybe it's a seal or a dolphin. When dolphins and seals were in the water, they did look very much like humans. Wei Wei Bai felt that since the egg was asleep, there should be nothing to monitor. He turned his attention to the villain. What's that old man doing? The system said, he's been looking at the egg every day, and he's even imitating you to sing for the egg. It seems like he wants the egg to call him daddy. Wei bye. Luckily, I didn't let the egg call me mom. For someone like her who was obsessed with looks, she would rather die than be paired with that old man. The system said, the old man even gives your egg some life force and a few types of ability liquids. Wei bye, is he trying to cultivate monsters? How many types of ability liquids can he give? The superpower fluid was extracted from the bodies of various monsters. The download the at https://m/sashu.com// to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click save below to record this chapter. Chapter 21-29. One could make a human die in a very artistic way. Two could make even a superpowered person die. The system said, the egg has no sequelae, it even absorbed it. Wei bye's attention was attracted by the villain. What else did he do? The system said, I think he's going to become the god of doomsday, and something about a nestling complex. Wei bye collected the information and closed her eyes to think. It took a lot of effort to sort it out before he said to the system, Zero is a very powerful superpower user. If it hatches successfully, it can control the entire world. Moreover, Zero's genes should be implanted with a strong nestling plot. It will have a natural affinity with whoever sees it first. She did nothing but smile and sing a song to Zero. She did not do anything. But the affinity still increased. This was the effect of the nestling complex. Although the indicator was broken, it did not stop her from guessing whether Zero had an affinity with her. Wei bye basically guessed, that's why the old man asked me if I saw it. If I really did see it, I'd probably be dead now. That old man wanted to be Zero's father. After chatting with the system about the villain's plan, she heard, we've arrived, prepare to jump. Wei bye opened her eyes, they were cold and clear. She got up and opened the door of the plane, the strong wind blew like knives. Wei bye put on her goggles and said to the superpowered people behind her, if anyone can't handle it, shout for me. With that, she jumped down without a parachute. The power of space could teleport her anywhere. She aimed at the Monster King's head and jumped on it. Then she reached behind her and pulled out a long silver sword, the world's toughest and sharpest weapon, and stabbed it into the monster's head. Blood spurted out. With so much blood, it was probably enough to hatch Zero. The Monster King roared, and all the monsters rushed over. All kinds of strange attacks were randomly directed at Wei bye. Wei bye smiled. Bright blood dripped from her hair. Her eyes were dyed with blood, like the setting sun, with wanton arrogance. However, she suddenly felt numb at the back of her neck, as if someone was staring at her. Wei bye suddenly turned around and disappeared into the air with her sword in hand. That peeping line of sight was immediately cut off. The lazy and seductive voice came from the egg. We've been discovered. She's really pretty. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 25. That calm and magnetic male voice said with a hint of danger, don't peek. The other two voices also sounded. In a childish and sweet voice, she said, the one outside is singing so badly. I don't want to listen. I want Wei. I'm hungry, I want to go out, I want to go out. Outside the egg, me was laughing crazily. Soon, all that's left is the Monster King's blood. Just a little more and you'll be out. Then, he would be its father. He would be its only master. He brought back a large amount of blood, and brought back 3 superpowered people. Number 3, who had the fire superpower, died. He wanted to take the treasure in the monster's nest, but he was surrounded and killed by the monsters. Just as the fighter jet was about to land in the base, the system's uneasy voice sounded in her ear, it's been blocked. Wei Wei Bai asked, what's been blocked? The system said, I can't see anything in the base, including that old man, download the at https://m sashu com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you like. Chapter 2130. Wei Wei Bai frowned. The system analyzed, although the side quest hasn't come out yet, it might have something to do with that old man. Wei Wei Bai didn't show any expression on her face. Instead, she calmly carried the blood and walked in with a few psychics. Meat stood in the hall and was very happy when he saw her. He was so happy that it was a little strange. Wei Wei Bai still looked serious and handed the blood to Me, mission accomplished. Me's fingers were even trembling. He immediately rushed to the glass tank and poured all the blood into the nutrient delivery tube. Soon, a red color appeared in the glass tank. It was murky and evil. It was unsettling. Zero's data also began to rise. Me was so excited that he kept shaking, soon, it will be out. After that, he turned around and said, everyone, gather. The psychics gathered. Including number 7 who had always wanted her life. He was tied up because he was the most disobedient. The old man Me opened his hand and said to everyone, soon, you will witness a beautiful miracle. This world has been rotting for too long and urgently needs a god to descend. That is Zero. It will be the most powerful weapon in this world. Monsters, humans, nothing can compare to it. Wei Wei Bai looked at the cult-like old man and silently took a few steps back. Zero didn't make a sound, as if it was really asleep. Maybe it was because there was too much monster blood. So it ate too much and digested it. Me's smile suddenly disappeared slowly and became ferocious and terrifying. But the nutrients it needs are far from enough. It needs more, and it needs your lives. After that, Wei Wei Bai's mind went blank. Suddenly, she crawled to the ground. She struggled to look up and saw all the psychics lying on the ground moaning in pain. The system said, your brain just suffered a strong impact, I gave you a life guarantee. No wonder she didn't feel pain, but her body was rapidly weakening. The system said, you have a fatal controller hidden in your brain. Wei Wei Bai said, is there no information? The system replied, no, this plane is missing a lot of information. Ever since Wei Wei Bai obtained the power of space that he couldn't afford, the degree of fragmentary information was frighteningly high. Me walked towards number 2. You're a wind elementalist, aren't you? Number 2 was at a loss. Me had already raised the gun, pointed it at his head, and fired. Then, the scientists acted as if they didn't see anything. They dragged the corpses to the nutrition tubes and dug out the ability crystals from the heads of the ability users. That scene was completely pixelated. Next, the espers were dealt with one by one. Number 7 seemed to want to manipulate the air, but his brain had been severely injured. Me pointed the gun at his head and said, goodbye, my disobedient child. In the end, only Wei Wei Bai was left. Wei Wei Bai lay on the ground quietly. She did not look like she was in pain. Her face was pale and fragile, and there was even a hint of loneliness and sadness in her eyes. Like a flower falling into the rain. Even Me, who had a heart of stone, softened for a moment. Wei Wei Bai, the child who worships me the most, and also my first successful test subject. You are my pride. Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly, as if she did not understand why he was treating her like this. But there was no hatred in her eyes. Me's smile could not help but become amiable. It's okay, I'll give you an injection so it won't hurt. You will understand me. This world needs God to save us. Your sacrifice is worth it. /button. Chapter 2131. Wei Wei Bai's expression was puzzled, confused, and sad. Her voice was so weak that it was almost inaudible. Can I hug Zero before I die? Amy smiled understandingly. I know. I hugged you the day you were successfully born. Wei Wei Bai, hearing this is as scary as a caterpillar crawling over my body. Amy got up with a disgusting look of pity. As long as you can crawl over by yourself. Wei Wei Bai was just stalling for time. Her body was so weak that she had no strength, but the life support guaranteed that she would not feel pain. She was almost able to use her ability, as long as she was given more time. So she pretended to be weak, slowly crawled to the glass tank, and reached out to touch the glass. There was a murky liquid inside, and she could barely see the eggshell. The crystals of the superpowered were all thrown in. Wei Wei Bai's pale face was reflected in the glass. She was calculating the time it would take for her body to recover. She said hypocritically, Zero, I'm back to see you. Zero suddenly trembled, and a calm voice came from the eggshell. Are you hurt? Wei Wei Bai, this voice, why is it so cold? Shouldn't Zero be sweet? Zero's calm voice sounded, do you need my help? This egg seems to have grown up, and it's quite polite. Wei Wei Bai's fingers were secretly gathering power, but she did not refute Zero's words. Child, give more encouragement, and your favorability will definitely increase. So Wei Wei Bai smiled like a saint. I'm fine, as long as I can see you. As soon as she finished speaking, the old man Amy came over with the medicine. He grabbed Wei Wei Bai's arm. Good child, we will remember your sacrifice. You superpowered crystals are the real source of Zero's power. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. It was impossible to reason with a lunatic. She narrowed her eyes dangerously and secretly cut open the space behind her. She was so close to grabbing the old man and entering the space together. Then it would be strange if she did not kill him. The needle was just about to touch her skin. Suddenly, a strange cracking sound came from behind him. Amy and Wei Wei Bai were slightly stunned. The cracking sounds grew louder and louder, like the sound of eggshells cracking. No, even the glass trough was breaking. The turbid nutrient liquid was disappearing rapidly. They all surged into the cracks in the broken eggshell. Amy's eyes were fanatical, and he was about to stab the needle down. Bai Wei Wei had long been on guard. Her entire body was about to retreat, and when she was about to remove the needle. Suddenly, the needle dropped. The old villain who was grabbing her arm stared at her with bloodshot eyes. Wei Wei Bai, a wire passed through the old man's forehead from the back of his head. It was exceptionally frightening. Wei Wei Bai immediately shook off the old man. When she turned around, she found that the glass trough was broken into pieces. The eggshell fell to the bottom of the glass trough. A lot of the eggshell had fallen off. She saw a hand gently peel off the outer layer of the eggshell. This was an exceptionally strange scene. The voltage in the laboratory became unstable, and all kinds of wires burst. All kinds of instruments also made sharp sounds. Wei Wei Bai's body was still weak. She sat on the ground and watched the eggshell fade away bit by bit. It was like a hand, then a foot that was stretched out, and finally his face. This was a body that was close to that of a teenager, but more mature than a teenager. Long hair that was as thick as dark silk fell down from the young man's flawless white body. Crystal clear water droplets fell from his hair into his skin. His eyelashes were as thick as black wings, and a holy halo appeared behind him. Everyone stared at him blankly. He slowly walked out of the broken glass. The glass shattered into powder under his fragile feet. Wei Wei Bai sat on the ground with a weak and pale face and looked up at him. He came in front of her, slowly bent down, and reached out his cold hands to hold her face. As if he was sighing, his half-closed eyes slowly opened. A cold golden light flowed in the depths of his eyes, like a light hell. "You want to see me? As you wish," he whispered, calm and soul-stirring. Wei Wei Bai was stunned, and then said softly, "Zero." Fuck, how old was her soft and cute heart? Why did it feel like she had hatched a great demon king? // Chapter 2132. Ling lowered her eyes to look at her. There was a sense of restrained coldness in her clear eyes. His fingers gently slid across her cheeks as if he was testing something. Finally, his fingertips came to the corner of her eyes and looked into the depths of her beautiful eyes. "What do you want me to do?" His voice was low, cold, and unwavering. Even his expression was as holy and calm as an angel. It was as if Wei Wei Bai was saying something, as if she was making a wish to him. And the wish would definitely come true. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched, and there was a trace of fluctuation in her eyes. It seemed like doubt, but more than that, it was curiosity. "Have you grown up?" she asked in a low voice. The little cookie suddenly turned into a big ice cube. She couldn't think straight for a moment. She was about to get into a car accident. Zero looked at her indifferently. There was a kind of frozen coldness in his emotionless face. "No, I've always been here." After saying that, he suddenly closed his eyes slowly. His whole body fell into Wei Wei Bai's arms. Wei Wei Bai reached out and caught him. She almost couldn't catch the smooth touch. Wei Wei Bai held the giant baby that had just been born and looked at the mess around her. The scientists and a bunch of assistants hid in the side trembling. They were all accomplices of the villain AI Me. As an ability user, Bai Weiwei's strength was still very great. She pulled her coat and wrapped it around Zero. After carrying him up, she said, "Clean up everything." The person in charge of the base was dead, so she was the boss. This was the rule of the Doomsday where the strong preyed on the weak. The scientists and assistants immediately ran over to clean up everything in fear. Wei Wei Bai brought Zero back to the room and put him on the bed. She also covered him with a blanket to cover his healthy white body. Wei Wei Bai sat by the bed, speechless. "I keep feeling that something is wrong. Let me figure it out." In just a month, Zero had not only hatched, but his brain had also turned from a baby to a normal person's IQ. This increase in IQ was simply shocking. However, the system saw that the gray area of the data was beginning to unlock. He said, "The data is starting to be unlocked. Wait for me for a while, there might be new data coming out later." Wei Wei Bai nodded, only to find that Ling suddenly opened her eyes. His long black hair was suddenly dyed by the cold blue haze. His cold hair color was like the ocean under the fog, giving off a deep and strange sense of beauty. Zero slowly stood up. Wei Wei Bai's eyebrows twitched. This guy, as expected, his half-closed eyes slowly opened. However, the color of his eyes changed from gold to brown. The dark red color carried a kind of demonic and rich beauty. He suddenly revealed a beautiful smile and casually reached out to push his long hair back. He reached out and grabbed Wei Wei Bai's clothes. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed and she was about to resist. He looked at her with a picky yet enchanting gaze. "Not bad. If you were too ugly, I might have killed you." His voice was low and hoarse. Every word he said made people's ears go numb. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed from puzzlement to vigilance. Her fingers clenched the blanket, ready to disappear at any time. However, Zero whispered, "Can I call you Wei Wei?" Seeing you smile so happily at that little fool, I'm really jealous. Slash. Chapter 2133. Their natural good feelings came from the first time they met her. This was the effect of the nestling complex. But this effect couldn't really influence their thoughts. Only the person who made them fall in love at first sight. They felt like they liked her very much, so they had a desire to monopolize and protect her. Even the coldest and calmest boss couldn't stop the influence of the nestling complex. Wei Wei Bai blinked, as if she was confused by the scene in front of her. And her fingers, holding a small knife, were already on Zero's neck. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, "Who are you?" She wasn't affected by the other party's seductive charm at all. However, Zero reached out and grabbed her knife. With a crack, the knife shattered into pieces. He narrowed his eyes and smiled, "You're so naughty. Just smile at me and sing to me. This is the only kindness I can show to my creator." After saying that, Zero lazily got up and stretched. He murmured in a low voice, "I'm hungry," then he left the bed naked and walked out step by step. This figure, this walking posture. It was unbelievably perfect. Wei Wei Bai immediately jumped up from the bed and followed. As soon as she went out, she saw an inhumane scene. The scientists and assistants were all entangled by wires. Zero stood in the middle of the hall with a lazy and seductive face. All the glass troughs began to break. He stepped on the glass barefoot and picked the innards of a monster. He inserted his fingers into the innards, and the innards withered. A trace of satisfaction appeared on Zero's face. Not enough for us to wake up. Wei Wei Bai wanted to light a cigarette at this moment and greet the main system's unspeakable lower body. Tongzi, how many consciousnesses does the monster below have? In fact, she felt that something was wrong from the beginning, but Zero had always been soft. She was also happy to be lazy, and her attention was dragged down by that old man AI me. As a result, she didn't notice in time that there was something wrong with the target. The system looked at the unlocked information and also wanted to light a cigarette to greet the main system. 4. Wei Wei Bai was silent. 2 people with schizophrenia were more than enough. What did it mean to have 4 of them? They could play a round of mahjong. The system replied, due to the fact that there were too many superpower elixirs, it led to schizophrenia. The primary personality represents rationality and wisdom, and the secondary personality is the naked pervert who is eating. It represents temptation and desire, and it has a powerful hypnotizing ability. The third one is violent and hungry, and likes to kill. The last one is your sweet biscuit, who cries when it's useless. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. The system added, all 4 of them need to reach 100 favorable impression points before it's considered a success. In other planes, a single target was enough to torment them. There were 4 in this plane. As expected, every time her favorability rose too quickly, it wasn't a good sign. Wei Wei Bai stared at the second personality. It had grayish-blue hair and reddish-brown eyes. It was clearly the same face. But when the main personality appeared, it was the ascetic type. And this, just by standing there lazily, she had a seductive posture. Bai Wei Wei looked at him and felt that something was wrong. Her body actually surged with a strange heat. She whispered, "Tongzi." The system immediately took out the mineral water for the system and poured it on Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai was indeed much cooler. But in the laboratory, everyone who was awake was slowly crawling towards Zero in a deranged manner. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com. Download the full article, https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 2134. After Zero absorbed all the nutrients in the nutrient tank, he turned around. His long hair fell behind him, making him look like a mermaid that had just emerged from the bottom of the sea. Every step he took was able to lure out the demons in people's hearts. Those people's eyes turned red and their bodies started to twitch. Then, they started hugging each other. Zero slowly revealed a cruel smile. He was like a monster that toyed with people's hearts, looking down at the ants beneath his feet. Then, he seemed to have noticed something. He raised his head and looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was standing on the iron ladder. Her eyes were clear and she was not affected by him. However, she seemed to be frightened as she stood on the top and looked at him blankly. Zero tilted his head strangely and put his fingertips into his thin lips. The seductive smile on his face became even more demonic. The system silently poured by Wei Wei another bucket of the system's pure water. The excitement that had just erupted from Bai Weiwei's body was gone. Therefore, she remained calm and looked at the man who looked like a monster below. The smile in Zero's eyes finally turned into a strange doubt. It was as if he felt that no one could resist his temptation. He kicked away those people who were rolling on the ground and walked up the stairs step by step. Wei Wei Bai tried to look at his neck calmly. She was really calm and was not affected by him at all. The reddish-brown color in Zero's eyes was like blood. It was more like a red rose that emitted an evil fragrance. He squinted his eyes dangerously. "Don't you like me?" On the side that represented desire, there was a strong sense of vanity that wanted everyone to look at him. He wanted everyone in this world to kneel down and look at him. To be trampled by him. Wei Wei Bai could not even pull out a smile for him. "I don't like you. The one I like is still the child who calls me master sweetly." After saying that, Wei Wei Bai looked at the chaotic scene below calmly and complained, "Next time, remember to tell me when you are in heat. I will find a few professional attendants for you. Otherwise, it will be very dirty." The seductive smile on Zero's face disappeared. She looked at him calmly as if she was looking at an object. There was no trace of gentleness. He was not moved in the slightest. Wei Wei Bai glanced at the time. "As a successful experiment subject, it's time for you to rest. Which scene do you like to sleep in? Do you need me to make an eggshell for you?" The colder she was. The color in Zero's eyes deepened. Or even violent. He suddenly reached out to grab her, wanting to destroy the calmness in her eyes. But in the next second, she suddenly disappeared. She reappeared with a gun in her hand and shot him in the waist without hesitation. It was the heaviest anesthetic. However, it seemed to have no effect on Zero at all. Instead, his hand grabbed her. Wei Wei Bai instantly disappeared again. What an annoying ability. Ling looked up coldly. Her coquettish eyes were no longer as natural as before. Instead, they were filled with irritation. In the next second, he seemed to see something. He grabbed at the air with his long fingers, and a malicious smile appeared on his face. "Caught you." He pulled down fiercely, but pulled down a piece of clothing. Zero was stunned for a moment before his eyes suddenly lit up with fervor. He looked around for her figure. His tired and lazy heart was completely activated by a fanaticism. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed at the air. Zero smiled, and his voice became sweet. "Where are you, Wei Wei? Come out and play with me. //. Chapter 2135. The world after the apocalypse was a mess. The base had lost its leader, the mercenaries, the scientists, and a bunch of assistants. Apart from the initial period of trembling with fear. After realizing that everything was working normally, they returned to their numb and indifferent attitude. After all, in this world, it was not unusual for a bunch of people to die every day. It would be abnormal if no one died. To the people in the base, it was just a change of leader. As long as the operation was not messed up and they could still survive, it did not matter. Wei Wei Bai was also expressionless as she walked around with a burden. Zero reached out and pinched the corner of her long white coat with his white fingers. He was already wearing clothes, it was the suspenders that she chose for him and a white mango t-shirt. He was also wearing cartoon sneakers. The young man, who was wearing an older child's outfit, pursed his thin lips, his beautiful eyebrows slightly furrowed. His voice was full of dependence. Wei Wei, are you busy? Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and was recording some data. In front of her was a large monster corpse. A bunch of people surrounded it to study. This year's monster wave was coming. The energy of the protective shield might not be able to withstand this year's monster wave. Because of the birth of a new king, a large number of humans were needed to support the new king of monsters. So this year, there would be many monsters, and they would be very strong. If the base could not withstand this wave of monster attack, everyone would die together. It was normal for the people in the base to be so excited about Zero's birth. This meant that the survival rate of the base would be higher. The premise was that this guy could be controlled. She thought of Zero's second personality, that seductive bastard who bewitched everyone. Wei Wei Bai's hand that was holding the pen was shaking, it was not certain who that guy would help when he appeared. What if he thought it was fun and let the monsters have sex with the humans? The scene would definitely be blocked. Wei Wei Bai narrowed her eyes and said to the system, "Are there any signs of the appearance of these personalities?" The system said, "Nutrition, third baby's murderous personality needs the most nutrition, fourth baby needs the least." Wei Wei Bai calculated, the main character, eldest baby, probably did not need much nutrition, just a little more than fourth baby. That second baby needed the second most nutrition. Because there were too many personalities, she decided to give them a serial number. In any case, Zero had eaten all the superpowered people in the base. Now, this title shall be given to Zero's personality. If he had a few more personalities one day, he would be able to gather a bunch of Calabash brothers. Wei Wei Bai, fortunately, I have a baby bird complex. Otherwise, I would have died as soon as I appeared. The fledgling complex should also depend on one's IQ. The lower the IQ, the higher the initial favorability of the fledgling complex. Just like the main personality, his IQ would definitely be high. The initial level of favorability was extremely low. Just 110. Wei Wei Bai sorted out some of the relationships between the personalities and was about to continue filling in the monster data. She felt a steady tug at the corner of her clothes behind her. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but turn around, only to see that the youth behind her was more than a head taller than her. He was staring at her blankly. There was a soft sense of grievance on his angelic face. Wei Wei is ignoring me. Last night, she sang to fourth baby and coaxed him to sleep until dawn. Wei Wei Bai also had to prevent the other personalities from suddenly flipping out. She was also tired. She hadn't become a mother yet, but she already experienced the miserable experience of raising a giant baby. It was better to give birth to a pillow than a baby. At least the pillow could be used to cushion her head and coax her to sleep. In the end, fourth baby woke up less than half an hour after she slept. Tea. Chapter 2136. Zero's sleep time was surprisingly short. Wei Wei Bai, with two dark circles under her eyes, looked at the motherless giant baby in front of her with a loving smile. Mom. No, I need to work too. If I don't work, I won't get any points. How can I raise you without points? You are the most important person to me. Anyway, this giant baby's IQ was not high. Regardless of whether the words were fake or not, she had to coax it first. Sure enough, a fourth baby's confused and wronged face revealed a happy smile. His thick eyelashes trembled, and his eyes were as soft as water. His beautiful sky blue eyes were clearer than the purest gemstones in this world. His golden hair was more dazzling than the sun. Golden hair and blue eyes, he looked like an angel in the legends. Wei Wei Bai silently covered her chest. It was so cute. Zero opened her beautiful blue eyes and asked softly, Wei Wei, you need to work. What is the work? I can help you work. Wei Wei Bai said perfunctorily, I just need to collect some data. That monster is the target of our research. I need to know how thick its skin is, what kind of attacks it can withstand, the structure of its internal organs, and the composition of its blood. Monsters in this world. There were all kinds of weirdos. Not to mention a bunch of aliens, octopus-like creatures, poisonous spiders, and plant monsters. These monsters had a common resonator. And a common nest. It was the Monster King. Every generation of Monster Kings had different abilities, but they all had one thing in common: they could control all monsters. This world is really dangerous, Wei Wei Bai thought calmly. Anyway, she had the power of space and could run anywhere, so she was not afraid of monsters. It was just that Zero's ability had not been fully developed due to lack of nutrition. She did not know if she could run away when the monster tide came. Her ability was not enough to drag another person into the space to hide. The space was full of dangerous spacetime power. If she dragged someone in, that person would die. Wei Wei Bai thought as she casually filled in some data. Suddenly, she heard a cry of surprise. She immediately looked up and found that Zero had walked to the large experiment table where the monster's body was placed. Although Zero was the standard height of a man, his body was a little slender, perhaps due to malnutrition. She looked exceptionally slender and beautiful. He stood beside the corpse of a monster the size of a small mountain, just like a real child. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Could it be that he was hungry and wanted to eat something? Don't absorb the monster you've spent so much effort to catch until there's only a layer of skin left. That would be difficult to explain. Bai Wei Wei immediately lifted her foot and walked over. However, she found fourth baby, who had a childish expression on his face, slowly counting something with his fingers. He lowered his black feather-like eyelashes, and his blue eyes were a little gray. He seriously bent his white fingers, and then used the index finger of one hand to count one by one with great effort. 21, 102. Bai Wei Wei walked up to him and raised her hand to touch his head. His golden hair was tied up by her hairband, and it fell quietly behind him. Zero's eyelashes fluttered, and a comfortable expression appeared on his face. He narrowed his eyes like a cat. Wei Wei Bai comforted him softly. What's wrong? Are you hungry? I'll take you to eat when I'm done with work. Zero immediately shook his head, shaking it too quickly. She didn't take her hand away, but instead rubbed the hair on the top of his head. His golden hair was a little messy on the top of his head. /T. Chapter 2137. It made him look even cuter. No, I'm helping Wei Wei with her work. Zero smiled proudly, then suddenly grabbed Wei Wei Bai's fingers. His fingers were clasped tightly, and he used a little too much strength. Wei Wei Bai frowned, and Zero immediately relaxed. He said worriedly, Wei Wei, does it hurt? Wei Wei Bai loosened her brows and shook her head. She felt that she could not work anymore. She should just coax the child. She was about to say that she would take him out to play when she suddenly froze. Rows of data appeared in her mind. This was, Weiwei Bike said cautiously, Tongzi. The system said, it's okay. It's just a data transfer, it won't invade your consciousness. It was guarding her consciousness. Weiwei Bai finally relaxed, but found that the data in front was almost exactly the same as the data she filled in on the paper. The latter part was the most important data of this monster. It was also the most difficult to study. However, it might not be correct because the lab had not studied it yet. Weiwei Bai looked at him in shock. Zero looked at her innocently. His blue eyes were pure and soft, and his expression was very pure and innocent. A faint white light appeared on his fingertips, and this white light wrapped around her fingers. After the data transfer, Zero immediately let go of her hand. He did not think that it was difficult, and his expression was very calm. Is this the data that Weiwei wants? I can help Weiwei with her work. At the end of his sentence, the corner of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a silly and cute smile. Weiwei Bai looked at him silently. Zero suddenly felt a little scared. He pursed his lips, as if he did not know if he did something wrong. Did I mess up the work? He asked softly like a child. Weiwei Bai shook her head. Suddenly, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. Then, she looked up and kissed him gently on his forehead. You did well. You're my pride. This is your reward. Zero liked this feeling very much. Ding, fourth baby's favorability is at 80. He repressed his infantile hysteria, knowing that she did not like his wild mode of expression. After breaking out of the shell, his IQ also began to increase. Slowly, he understood a lot. She was no longer just capricious. His feelings for her were also slowly changing. It was as if he was no longer just relying on her. Instead, it was more of a desire to protect. Seeing that she was happily recording the data, Zero couldn't help but narrow his eyes and reveal a satisfied smile. She was very happy. He was also very happy. The work of the monster was done. Weiwei Bai took out some life force and poured it into a cup for Zero to drink. There was not much life source left. He had to be thrifty. Zero hugged the huge cup and gulped down the contents like a child. Weiwei Bai lowered her head and sorted out some teaching materials. She hoped that she could teach this fourth baby to be upright, kind, and beautiful. The remaining 3 personalities weren't anything good, so it was better to keep the best personality. Then, after reaching 100 points, he would let the kind and beautiful fourth baby angel influence the rest of the babies. She thought of Air was transvestite look. Weiwei Bai trembled. Fourth baby was still the best. Weiwei Bai suddenly saw fourth baby looking at the cup expressionlessly. Tea. Chapter 2138. This expression made her eyebrows jump again. Was he going to change his personality again? Such an indifferent expression, was it Dewa? Sure enough, the young man in front of her had golden hair dyed with a rich black. His beautiful and pure blue eyes were occupied by an incomparably cold golden color. It was just a matter of a moment. The young man in front of her put down the cup and unhurriedly reached out to take out a handkerchief from the air. This handkerchief was brand new. At first glance, it was taken from the room where they put their daily necessities. This was the upgraded space power. Breaking through space to take something elsewhere, people didn't even need to move. It was much more advanced than her power. Dewa, no, Zero, used the handkerchief to elegantly wipe the corners of his mouth. His eyes were deep with a trace of laziness that just woke up, and the cold golden color circulated in the depths of his eyes. His posture was innately orderly, elegant, and noble. He glanced at Wei Wei Bai indifferently, his expression cold and restrained. Besides the data of the Yala beast just now, do you need any other data? The loving smile on Bai Wei Wei's face also disappeared. She rubbed the bridge of her nose with some distress, as if she was surprised by his appearance. Then Wei Wei Bai adjusted her state, changing herself from a kind guardian to a calm person in charge of the base. How many consciousnesses do you have? Zero glanced at her indifferently. You don't need to know this. I will restrain them from attacking you. As long as you don't court death, I will give you a benevolent life. His words were arrogant and indifferent. Like a god high above, with a trace of calm softness, he looked at the ants under his feet. Even if she was an ant favored. To him, she was just an ant. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be more irritated. She took out a box of cigarettes from the drawer and a matchbox. The matchbox was the kind that cost 20 cents before the end of the world. The red wick slid across the cover of the box on her white fingertips, and a cluster of red fireworks suddenly rose. Wei Wei Bai put the cigarette between her bright red lips with a hint of laziness. She had always been calm and serious, but at this moment, because of her impatient sarcasm, there was a hint of sharpness in her eyes. Wei Wei Bai carelessly exhaled a mouthful of smoke and said sarcastically, "A benevolent life? Do you think that you deserve to mention the word benevolence in this world? To be honest, I'm only interested in your ability. If you want to be a god, then get out of here. You're not a god. You're a god." She did not care about how capable he was at all. In fact, his attitude was even more arrogant and cold than his. Zero's face was covered in smoke. In the haze, his indifferent eyes appeared even more profound and beautiful. Wei Wei Bai flicked the ash off her cigarette elegantly. "I'm not like that old lunatic AI me. I'm not interested in you. To me, if a test subject doesn't listen, then it's trash." Zero seemed to be a little surprised by her attitude. Her indifferent face was reflected in the depths of his cold and deep golden eyes. His slender white fingers tapped on the table unhurriedly. He seemed to be thinking about something. Wei Wei Bai calmly said, "This world is full of lunatics, we don't need you. But don't be crazy, I don't buy it." Chapter 2139. Zero's calm eyes finally showed a ripple. It seemed to be true, there was no desire in her eyes. There was no fear of death, surprisingly calm. But why was she so kind and gentle towards his childish personality? Zero suddenly reached out, slowly but irresistibly clasped her chin, forcing her to look at him. His expression was still indifferent, and there was a trace of cold scrutiny in his eyes. "I'm stronger than you, number one." Number one, what a cold name. This main personality was ascetic, rational, and a hard bone to chew. Wei Wei Bai's eyes became sharp, and the ruthlessness cultivated by the end of the world surged up. She slowly and fiercely crushed the cigarette butt on the back of his hand. Zero seemed a little surprised, but he didn't avoid it. Because it didn't hurt him at all. But in the next second, Wei Wei Bai suddenly clasped his shoulder and threw him on the table. The glass shattered all over the floor. She straddled his waist, sat down hard, and strangled his neck with one hand. Zero didn't seem to be on guard against her impulse, his black hair scattered and fell under the table, calmly and rationally looking at the irritable Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head, her fragrant lips almost touching his. "You should be the main personality, but you're really an annoying personality, just obediently continue to sleep, I only need your childish personality." Her eyes had the murderous determination of a doomsday soldier, and also a careless disregard for death. "The only thing that made me happy about your birth was that child, it's better to erase the remaining personality." All her gentleness. It was only the childish personality that she had for him. She didn't care about the rest of the personalities. Zero's indifferent expression didn't change at all. He had been observing her, as if he felt that there was something hidden behind her cold and irritable mask. But he couldn't see it clearly. Wei Bai patted his face like a hooligan. "Give me a benevolent life." What a joke. This old lady is in charge of her own life. Who do you think you are? Why should I let you control my life? You're just a cub born a few days old. You really know how to talk big. In the apocalypse, those who had just been born, or those who had just been born with superpowers, they were all called cubs. Cub is a derogatory term. It represented an inexperienced little idiot who overestimated himself. Zero looked at her strangely, as if he was looking at a toy that had suddenly mutated. Her gentleness towards him had disappeared because of his change of personality. Zero's eyelashes drooped slightly, half closing her cold golden eyes. Her black eyelashes were like a net, covering the emotions in the depths of her eyes. He didn't seem to get angry. However, he was a little curious. Like an old wise man, he looked deeply at the furious Wei Bai, as if he was looking at an immature child. Zero stared at her calmly and deeply, without any desire or emotion. He suddenly said indifferently, "I'm very disappointed. It seems that you still know nothing about power." After saying that, the space suddenly began to distort. Wei Bai's expression changed, and her eyes instantly became incomparably sharp. Her fingers actually couldn't choke his neck. The cutting power of the space had already arrived behind her, and that terrifying power twisted the air. It even cut off a few strands of her hair. Wei Bai found that her space power, in front of him, was like a child without the strength to truss up a chicken. She didn't have the chance to fight back. However, she didn't beg for mercy, nor was she afraid. Her delicate face suddenly revealed a few traces of a sinister smile. She stretched out her hand, and the brutal air cut her flesh. The blood on her fingers splashed onto Zero's inhumanly pure face. The blood condensed into a blood blade, which was a materialized object obtained by the power of the space distortion. The blood blade ruthlessly pierced into his abdomen. However, his skin was unexpectedly thick, and unexpectedly, only a little bit of skin was pierced. His blood merged with hers, forming a flirtatious rose color. Wei Bai faintly raised her eyebrows. "It seems that I am indeed going to die. The weak are prey to the strong, so it doesn't matter. However, I still have to make you pay a price." After saying that, Wei Bai clasped his calm and pure face. Without hesitation, she bit his lips. 0//T. Chapter 2140. This scene was unusually bloody and violent, but it was also mixed with some kind of secret ambiguity. Her usually serious expression was now replaced by a reckless and childish vigor. Her slender fingers were supposed to be holding a pen to record the experimental data. At this moment, she was doing an unforgivable, even blasphemous thing to him. Zero stretched out his hand, wanting to push her away. However, he saw her staring straight at him. Her pretty and delicate eyes were slightly downcast, making her look incomparably gentle and beautiful. However, her eyes were burning with a violent and bright flame. She was not afraid of death. Her usual mature appearance was even a disguise. The impulsiveness and brainlessness in her body were even more unintelligent than his childish side. Zero's cold and heartless eyes looked at her coldly, feeling that there was no need to be too calculative with her. So, just as he was about to withdraw his finger. However, it was caught by her and just intertwined. The blood on her finger spread to his fingertips. The warm blood quickly cooled down. She was very fragrant and soft. Even sweet. However, it was not annoying. Zero frowned slightly, but he heard her whisper in his ear provocatively, "Why don't you continue? Don't you want to kill me?" Zero felt the strength of her fingers, but this kind of strength that wanted to break his fingers had a trace of restrained gentleness. She did not hurt his consciousness. Zero was smart enough to notice this. He lowered his eyes and suddenly said softly, "With your personality, you will be at a disadvantage." His creator, the maintainer of the fledgling complex. There was something wrong with her brain. Perhaps, it was similar to his childish personality. Was that why they got along? Zero's beautiful eyelashes gently drooped and finally covered his golden eyes. He did not sense the real killing intent. He did not have the intention to test her at the beginning. She was harmless. Before Zero fell asleep, he said this to his other personalities. Wei Wei Bai was still bloody. Her hands and feet trembled as she pretended to force herself on him. She did not have enough strength. The blood flowed out, and she almost went into shock due to excessive blood loss. Suddenly, she felt that something was wrong. Wei Wei Bai looked at Zero with some darkness in front of her eyes. Zero also stared at her blankly. A hint of confusion appeared in his sky-blue eyes, as if he didn't understand what was wrong with him. She didn't understand what was wrong with Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai immediately softened her tense nerves. She happily held his face and kissed him randomly. "Fourth Wa, you're back." The system was turning over the tourniquet when it heard Wei Wei Bai yelling at Fourth Baby. The corners of its mouth twitched. It was fine to just call out the name Fourth Baby in its heart. Wasn't it embarrassing to call out such a tacky name? Only then did Zero realize that he was lying on the table. His clothes were in a mess. His face reeked of blood, as well as the lipstick mark left behind by the blood. Zero Primal Chaos had just regained his senses, and he did not have any memory of what had just happened. Sometimes their memories were in common, and sometimes they were not. The more powerful one was, the more one would be able to control all the memories. If the higher personality didn't want to share the memory, he wouldn't know what would happen to that personality. Just like now, he finally realized how badly Wei Wei Bai's arm was injured. Zero stared at Bai Weiwei with his blue eyes that were as tender as a deer's. He said in disbelief, "You're injured." Who was it? Was it the person who had ordered him to sleep? Zero was at a loss for a moment. He immediately grabbed Wei Wei Bai's arm and a white halo appeared. He began to repair Wei Wei Bai's arm. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.